Chapter 99. After so many things happened, he had to see Zhao Jiqing or he wouldn't be able to cultivate in peace. While Mu Rongyu went to the hidden fairy valley, the news of him causing trouble in Zhushenzong had spread throughout the cultivation world. Mu Rongyu rebelled against Zhushenzong and killed more than a dozen elders of Zhushenzong. Some of them were even tribulation passing stage experts. In that great battle, there were thousands of disciples who were caught in the crossfire, and innocents who were caught in the crossfire were killed. Even though the head of the Book Void Heavenly Sect had an immortal weapon, he was still seriously injured. He just had a conflict with Yuan Su sect and then rebelled against his own sect. No matter where Mu Rongyu went, he'd cause a lot of trouble. When he went to Demon Mountain, the Demon Mountain Lord was going through his tribulation. In ancient Spring City, he killed Yuan Su sect and other sects' disciples. This time, even a transcending tribulation stage cultivator was killed. Even the half-immortal Zhuang Ningguang was almost killed. Of course, after this news spread, the reason why Mu Rongyu rebelled against Zhushenzong was also spread. After all, the Void Sky sect had several 100,000 disciples, and everyone already knew about what had happened. So, if they wanted to suppress this news, it was almost impossible. So Zhushenzong actually coveted Mu Rongyu's things, just like Yuan Su sect. No wonder Mu Rongyu rebelled against Zhushenzong. Isn't that so? If it was me, I would also rebel against Zhushenzong. Although Zhushenzong is one of the top 10 sects, Mu Rongyu said that he didn't even cultivate Zhushenzong's basic cultivation method. That's not strange. He didn't cultivate Zhushenzong's cultivation method at all, which means that he cultivated other cultivation methods. If it was me, I would also be jealous of such a powerful cultivation method. Who wouldn't be? It's just that I pity Zhushenzong's people. They went for wool and came home shorn. If they didn't rely on Mu Rongyu might become an expert with great potential in their sect. But now, Mu Rongyu rebelled against the sect. I'm afraid that the two sides are like fire and water. With Mu Rongyu's character, if he succeeds in his cultivation, he would definitely target Zhushenzong. I heard that Zhushenzong's sect leader was punished by those old monsters. TSK, this matter, Zhushenzong really lost face. Ha! Although our Yuan Su sect's cultivator, Mu Rongyu's sect. But Zhushenzong's sect leader was almost killed by Mu Rongyu. Ha! Zhushenzong really lost face. This was what Yuan Su sect's disciples said after hearing about this matter. For a period of time, because of Fei Mingzhong's matter, Yuan Su sect was ridiculed by the cultivation world, almost unable to raise their heads. But now that such a thing happened, everyone's mocking eyes were on Zhushenzong. In fact, compared to Zhushenzong, the humiliation Yuan Su sect suffered that day was really not worth mentioning, because they were very gloating. Mu Rongyu was just a revolving reflection cultivator. How could he be so strong? Could it be that there was really an expert secretly helping him? Everyone was puzzled. Mu Rongyu didn't have any expert helping him. It is said that he has a golden skeleton. The golden skeleton is very terrifying. It really can kill gods, meet immortals, kill immortals. Zhuang Ningguang was almost killed by this golden skeleton. That golden skeleton should be the skeleton of an immortal. No one knew how it was obtained by Mu Rongyu. When the news of the golden skeleton spread out, many people in the cultivation world dispelled the idea of Mu Rongyu. After all, that was a golden skeleton that even half-immortals couldn't resist. They dared to have ideas about Mu Rongyu. That was really the same as courting death. Of course, although the golden skeleton was very powerful. But after all, it was a dead thing. It always had a weakness. And those big sects were not afraid of the golden skeleton at all. Especially Zhuang Ningguang. He already vaguely knew the golden skeleton's weakness. Whether it was Mu Rongyu's cultivation method or the golden skeleton, in short, now the entire cultivation world was talking about Mu Rongyu, this revolving reflection cultivator. Fierce and powerful, Mu Rongyu was indeed the most famous person in the cultivation world. Moreover, he was only a revolving reflection cultivator. It was really rare. Of course, with Mu Rongyu's fierce reputation, more cultivators began to have ideas about him. Especially Zhushenzong and Yuan Su sect. their disciples and experts had already begun to look for Murongyu in the cultivation world. At this time, Murongyu was walking on the road to the hidden fairy valley. The Greenlight sect was located in a mountain range between Zushinzong and the hidden fairy valley. It was a small sect. In the cultivation world of hundreds of millions of cultivation sects, it was not at all eye-catching. At this time, outside the Greenlight sect, a figure riding a long spear was flying towards the depths of the Greenlight sect. Who dares to break into the Greenlight sect? Two figures flew up from the ground, blocking in front of the person, and shouted, "Get lost!" The person who came was Murongyu. Seeing that two revolving reflection cultivators wanted to stop him, he couldn't help but frown and shout, "You're courting death." The two Greenlight sect disciples were furious. They slapped their storage bags, and two sword lights shot towards Murongyu. Murongyu's eyes narrowed slightly, and a cold, murderous intent flashed between his eyebrows. He had just started a massacre in Zushinzong not long ago, and these two revolving reflection cultivators dared to attack him. They were simply courting death. Boom! Above Murongyu's head, 50 extremely condensed pan-chi shadows appeared out of thin air. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the two flying swords that were flying towards him. Kacha! Kacha! He grabbed the two flying swords, which were low-grade magic tools, in his hands and crushed them into scrap metal. The two Greenlight sect disciples were shocked. They looked at Murongyu as if they had seen a ghost. At this time, Murongyu had already thrown away the two piles of scrap metal in his hand, and then slapped towards the two revolving reflection cultivators. Murongyu's strength was already comparable to a cultivator who had just entered the heart-stirring stage. How could two revolving reflection cultivators resist him? The big hand slapped, and the two revolving reflection cultivators only had time to let out two blood-curdling screams before they were directly slapped into a bloody mist. Murongyu clapped his big hand and coldly snorted, overconfident. Then he continued to fly towards the depths of the Greenlight sect on his spear. Enemy attack. The screams had already attracted the attention of the Greenlight sect. A sharp and resounding voice rang out from afar. Following that, countless Greenlight sect's disciples soared into the sky and charged towards Murongyu. The 50 pan-chi shadows above Murongyu's head, and his body flashed with purple light. He simply landed on the ground, and with the phoenix spear in his hand, he rushed towards the mountain with a murderous aura. Puff! 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 After all, the Greenlight sect was only a small sect, and there were no powerful disciples at all. Some cultivators below the heart-stirring stage couldn't even get close to Murongyu's body, and had already been shattered by him. In fact, in the Greenlight sect, the strongest person was the sect master, who was at the late stage of the spirit-severing stage, not even at the body fusion stage. Because of the relationship in the ancient spring city that day, Murongyu had long wanted to eradicate the Greenlight sect. On the way to the hidden fairy valley, Murongyu happened to pass by the Greenlight sect. So, he directly rushed up to kill. For a time, blood splattered, and countless cultivators were killed by Murongyu. In the end, these people didn't dare to approach Murongyu at all. They just let Murongyu kill his way up the mountain. Murongyu, you have big dog guts. How dare you kill my Greenlight sect disciples? You are really courting death. A cultivator flew in the air, and he was at least an out-of-body stage cultivator. Boom! The person was very fast, and with a slap, he sent Murongyu flying. However, because Murongyu was protected by the purple ribbon holy robe, the out-of-body stage cultivator couldn't hurt him. However, Murongyu was not the opponent's opponent at all. After a few consecutive exchanges, he was directly sent flying out of the Greenlight sect. Murongyu was a little embarrassed. Chapter 100. Very good, Murongyu. You've finally come to your senses. Otherwise, I have to remind you, you have the #1 physique in the world, the supreme physique, the chaotic celestial body. You should strengthen yourself and fight with your own strength instead of relying on external forces. Although Murongyu had killed many people in the Greenlight sect, the green light sect did not dare to pursue him. Why was that? It was because they were frightened by Murong Yu's golden skeleton. However, they did not know that Murong Yu had already decided that he would not use the golden skeleton unless it was a matter of life and death. After leaving the green light sect, Murong Yu flew all the way to the hidden fairy valley. Since Murong Yu did not take the main road or enter the city, he did not encounter any cultivators. Even if he did encounter cultivators, they did not dare to attack him because they were afraid of Murong Yu. Most importantly, Murong Yu knew that he was too weak and took the initiative to avoid many people. After all, if his whereabouts were exposed, Zhu Shenzong and the experts from the Yuanshu sect would come and kill him. At that time, Murong Yu would have to hide in the Hichu Luoshu world or use the golden skeleton. However, although the golden skeleton was extremely powerful, its weakness would be discovered if it was used too many times. At that time, they would not have to worry about Murong Yu. The Hidden Fairy Valley was one of the top 10 sects in the cultivation world. It was very powerful and located in the Hidden Fairy Valley. In fact, this was where the Hidden Fairy Valley came from. Like Zhu Shenzong, the Hidden Fairy Valley had hundreds of thousands of disciples, and the sect was very large. Because he was looking for Zhao Jiqing, Murong Yu did not dare to enter the Hidden Fairy Valley so rashly. Otherwise, if he provoked the old monsters in the Hidden Fairy Valley, he would be the one to suffer. Moreover, this time, he was not here to cause trouble. They landed in front of the Hidden Fairy Valley sect in an orderly manner. 2 Hidden Fairy Valley disciples walked out. "Greetings, senior brothers. I'm looking for a disciple of your sect, Zhao Jiqing. I wonder if the 2 of you can make an exception?" Murong Yu walked up and asked politely. The Hidden Fairy Valley was indeed the sect with the best reputation among the 10 great sects. Even the 2 disciples guarding the door had reached the heart-stirring stage. Most importantly, when these 2 heart-stirring stage cultivators saw Murong Yu, who was only at the revolving reflection stage, they didn't show any arrogance or look down on him. "Junior brother, you said you're looking for Zhao Jiqing? Do you know Sister Zhao?" One of the young disciples looked at Murong Yu with a strange expression. Murong Yu smiled and said, "In the secular world, she and I are best friends. This time, I'm looking for her." On the surface, Murong Yu maintained a smile. But in reality, he was shocked. Sister Zhao? When did Zhao Jiqing become their senior sister? Could it be that Zhao Jiqing's strength has already surpassed the heart-stirring stage? It should be known that in the cultivation world, there was no seniority based on who entered the sect first. As long as one's strength was strong, even if one came later, they would still have a higher seniority. "Junior brother, are you really Sister Zhao's good friend in the secular world? Don't deceive me." The other cultivator looked at Murong Yu with a suspicious expression. Murong Yu didn't mind. He just shrugged and said, "If the Sister Zhao you're talking about is the Zhao Jiqing I'm looking for, then we are indeed good friends in the secular world. But, senior brothers, I'm curious to ask, Zhao Jiqing should have entered the sect 2 years ago. Could it be that her cultivation has surpassed yours? You call her senior sister?" Hearing this, the 2 looked at each other and then laughed. "Junior brother, you don't know. Sister Zhao was originally the disciple of Elder Huangfu Ranxue. Moreover, she recently became the Holy Maiden of the Hidden Fairy Valley. Naturally, we respectfully call her senior sister." "What? Holy Maiden?" Murong Yu was shocked. He looked at the 2 in disbelief. "She became the Holy Maiden of the Hidden Fairy Valley?" "Yes, 3 months ago, Sister Zhao officially became our Holy Maiden." The 2's eyes flashed with a blazing light. Murong Yu was shocked, but at the same time, he frowned deeply. What was a holy maiden? Every sect would have a holy son or holy maiden. These holy sons and holy maidens were qualified to compete for the position of sect disciple in the future. In the sect, the true disciple was the disciple with the highest status. The holy son and holy maiden status was higher than that of the true disciple, almost on par with the chief disciple. For example, Zhu Shenzong, there were many holy sons and holy maidens. However, there was only one chief disciple. If Zhuang Ningguang abdicated, then the position of sect master would be decided by the chief disciple, Holy Sun, and Holy Maiden. Zhao Jiqing actually became the Holy Maiden. Moreover, Murongyu estimated that her strength should not be at the fusion stage yet. Being chosen as the Holy Maiden at such a low level meant that the hidden fairy valley had taken a fancy to Zhao Jiqing's potential. Immortal spirit body. As long as Zhao Jiqing grew up, her future achievements would definitely not be low. The hidden fairy valley saw Zhao Jiqing's huge potential, so they focused on cultivating her from the beginning. After the shock, Murongyu was very happy. Now it seemed that Zhao Jiqing joining the hidden fairy valley was definitely the best choice. Even without Murongyu, Zhao Jiqing's future would be smooth sailing and great achievements. Thinking of this, Murongyu breathed a sigh of relief. Two senior brothers, I want to see your sister Zhao. Is it possible? I have an urgent matter to discuss with her, Murongyu said as he looked at the two men. When the two guys talked about Zhao Jiqing, they had a look of admiration. Seeing this scene, Murongyu could not help but laugh. After all, with Zhao Jiqing's beauty and current status, it would be strange if these male disciples did not admire her. No problem, leave it to us. The two guys immediately patted their chest and said to Murongyu, let's go, we'll take you there. As they spoke, one of the cultivators turned and was about to leave. Murongyu was surprised and quickly said, two senior brothers, aren't you supposed to be guarding the door? Murongyu pointed at the hidden fairy valley and said, ha, junior brother, we are not guarding the door. This time, we just happened to come out and meet you. All right, how should I address you? Murongyu. So it's junior brother Murongyu. You and our sister Zhao are close friends in the mortal world, right? Do you have a chance to introduce us? We have admired Sister Zhao for a long time. Yes, Sister Zhao is the #1 beauty of our hidden fairy valley. Normally, we are not qualified to know her. All right, I'm Jiang Lu, and he's Chong Lu. The two guys seem to be very familiar with each other and seem to have other motives. If there's a chance, of course. Murongyu replied. In his heart, he almost laughed out loud. These two guys had similar personalities and the same name. They were a perfect match. Suddenly, Chong Lu slapped his thigh and turned to look at Murongyu and exclaimed, oh no, junior brother Murong, you said you are Murongyu? Murongyu? Are you the Murongyu who has been in the limelight recently? Jiang Lu also looked at Murongyu in shock. At the same time, while talking, the two guys involuntarily took 2 steps away from Murongyu. Seeing the reaction of the two guys, Murongyu was speechless and said, you too. I'm not that scary, right? The implication was that he had already confirmed his identity. Are you really the fierce person who rebelled against Zushenzong and killed a dozen of Zushenzong's elders? Chong Lu looked at Murongyu with a dull expression. Murongyu nodded. Seeing Murongyu nod, Chong Lu and Jiang Lu took a few more steps back. Then they looked at Murongyu with vigilance and said, Murongyu, you wouldn't want to kill the two of us, right? Murongyu was speechless. He was completely defeated by the two of them and said, do I have a grudge with you two? Why would I want to kill you? Moreover, the two of you are heart-stirring stage cultivators. I am just a small revolving reflection stage cultivator. How can I kill you too? Jiang Lu and Chong Lu quickly shook their heads. You can even kill a crossing tribulation stage cultivator, let alone the two of us? Then the two guys bitterly said, I say, Murongyu, no, Senior Murong, you have to be merciful. We have 80 old mothers. We have, in short, you can't kill us. Do you want me to introduce you to Zhao Jiqing? Murongyu really wanted to send these two bastards flying. It was really too much nonsense. You really won't kill us? Murongyu shook his head. Although I've killed a lot of people, everyone deserved to be killed. The two of you shouldn't have any ideas about me, right? If that's the case, then I can only kill the two of you. Chong Lu and Jiang Lu quickly shook their heads. Isn't that right? Murongyu, won't kill the innocent. What are you afraid of? Let's go find the saintess. Chong Lu and Jiang Lu suspiciously led the way for Murongyu. However, not long after, the three guys were already putting their arms around each other's shoulders as if they had been together for decades. Brother Murong, You have been in Zhushenzong for so long. Have you seen the Zhushenzong saintess? I heard that there's a saintess who is really beautiful. Chonglu said with a wretched expression. When I was in Zhushenzong, I was just a small foundation establishment stage cultivator. How could I have the qualifications to see those saintesses? I have never even heard of them. Murongyu rolled his eyes. He really hadn't heard of these saintesses. He didn't even know who the chief disciple of Zhushenzong was. That's right. What is your relationship with our sister Zhao? Could it be that kind of relationship? Jianglu suddenly smiled wretchedly. He looked at Murongyu with a you-know-what-I-mean look. It's none of your business. Murongyu rolled his eyes again. He now realized that these two guys were really too wretched. However, Brother Murong, I have to warn you. If you and Sister Zhao really have that kind of relationship, then you have to hurry up. Recently, there are many people in the sect who have ideas about Sister Zhao. Chonglu suddenly said with a dignified expression. Oh, someone has ideas about Zhao Jiqing? Who has the guts to do that? Murongyu was instantly enraged. His tone was ice-cold as his killing intent overflowed and filled the air. Chapter 101. Zhao Jiqing was not only Murongyu's childhood sweetheart, but also had a very deep relationship with him. People like Chonglu and Jiang Lu wanted to get to know Zhao Jiqing. Murongyu wouldn't have any revulsion at all. After all, even if he introduced them to each other, they wouldn't dare to have any ideas about Zhao Jiqing. After all, they weren't on the same level as Zhao Jiqing. But if he heard that someone really wanted to have ideas about Zhao Jiqing, Murongyu would be enraged. Zhao Jiqing was his reverse scale, and he definitely wouldn't let anyone have any ideas about her. Whoever dared to do so, Murongyu wouldn't hesitate to start a massacre. Sensing the cold, murderous intent emitted from Murongyu's body, Jiang Lu and Chong Lu were shocked. From Murongyu's reaction, his relationship with Zhao Jiqing shouldn't be ordinary. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have such a strong reaction. Jiang Lu and Chong Lu looked at each other and then said, Brother Murong, don't blame us for being nosy about this matter. Sister Zhao is really too beautiful. Plus, she's the sect's holy maiden. Who doesn't have ideas about her? Especially those holy sons, and even the sect's chief disciple, and even the other sect's young talents who want to pursue Sister Zhao. Murongyu's eyes narrowed slightly, and a cold, murderous intent flashed past his brows. He looked at the two of them and asked, Ordinary pursuers are still okay, but is there anyone who used third-rate methods? Jiang Lu and Chong Lu both hurriedly shook their heads. They were only inner disciples of the hidden fairy valley and had only heard of this matter. As for who among them were pursuing Zhao Jiqing, they didn't know. He also did not know what methods they used to pursue Zhao Jiqing. Murongyu was a little anxious. He was not afraid that Zhao Jiqing would follow someone and become their cultivation partner. However, Zhao Jiqing was really too naive and inexperienced. He was worried that others would use underhanded methods. Let's go, hurry up. Murongyu was feeling anxious, and he could not help but urge Chong Lu and Jian Xiaotian. Junior brothers, why are you in such a hurry? You actually brought an outsider around the sect? What are you going to do? The more Murongyu wanted to see Zhao Jiqing, the more he wanted to see her, the more he didn't want to see her. As a matter of fact, a group of people suddenly walked over from the front and blocked the three of them. Seeing the people who came, Chong Lu and Jiang Li's faces immediately darkened. Chong Lu even took a step forward and said to the man who spoke, Su Rue, what does what we do have to do with you? Furthermore, although Brother Murong is not a disciple of the sect, he is Sister Zhao's friend. What's wrong with me bringing him in? Su Rue looked at Murongyu and the other two and sneered. Saint Maiden's friend? Are you trying to make me laugh to death? There are so many people in the world. If everyone says that he is the Saint Maiden's friend, then wouldn't you bring all of them into the sect? What do you think the hidden fairy valley is? An inn? Hearing this, Jiang Lu and Chong Li's faces became even more gloomy. Boundless anger accumulated in their chests, but they did not explode. Looking at the expressions of Jiang Lu and the other two, although they were very angry, they did not dare to explode. Morong fell into deep thought. With the personalities of these two, they were definitely not people who could endure. Then there were only two possibilities. One was that Chong Lu and the other two had suffered in the hands of Su Rue. The other was that Su Rue had a backer, and Chong Lu and the other two could not afford to offend him. Seeing Jiang Lu and the other two's faces turn red, Su Rue sneered. Following which, he looked at Morong Yu and his face instantly turned cold. His heartbeat stage aura swept towards Morong Yu like a stormy sea. In his eyes, Morong Yu was only an ant in the revolving reflection stage. He could humiliate him however he wanted. Furthermore, it seemed that his relationship with Chong Lu and the other two wasn't bad. Su Rue sneered in his heart as his powerful aura enveloped Morong Yu. Who are you? Why did you trespass into the hidden fairy valley? Do you know that trespassing into the hidden fairy valley is a capital offense? Kneel down. As he spoke, his aura swept towards Morong Yu like a stormy sea, wanting Morong Yu to kneel down. Morong Yu narrowed his eyes as a trace of cold, killing intent flashed in the depths of his eyes. Morong Yu originally did not want to poke his nose into the grudge between Su Rue and Jiang Lu. After all, they were in the hidden fairy valley. However, this Su Rue actually wanted to target him. Furthermore, he wanted him to kneel down. One must know that even when facing the half-immortal Zhuang Ningguang and the others, they had never thought of humiliating him like this. However, Morong Yu did not know that the reason why Su Rue was targeting him was because of the relationship between Chong Lu and the other two. Su Rue's cultivation was on par with Chong Lu and the other two, so it was impossible for him to humiliate Chong Lu and the other two. Thus, he could only turn his attention to humiliating Jiang Lu and the other two's friends. Seeing this scene, Chong Lu and Jiang Lu looked at each other with shock in their eyes. Wasn't Su Rue courting death by provoking Morong Yu? In fact, they even wanted Morong Yu to kill this bastard. However, if Su Rue was killed, the consequences would be unimaginable. The two of them would no longer be able to stay in the hidden fairy valley. With a flash, the two of them took a step forward and stood in front of Morong Yu. They coldly looked at Su Rue and said, Su Rue, Brother Morong is the Saintess' friend. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to disrespect the Saintess? Su Rue sneered. I naturally wouldn't dare to disrespect the Saintess. However, I can't stand seeing someone pretending to be the Saintess' girlfriend and trying to swindle us. This person looks like a thief, and I can tell that he's a swindler with a single glance. You guys were actually tricked by him. Today, I will chase him down the mountain. Otherwise, can you guys bear the consequences if he tries to harm the Saintess? As he spoke, Su Rue strode over and was about to take down Morong Yu. Jiang Lu and Chong Lu cursed Su Rue in their hearts. Morong Yu is acting like a thief? He's clearly looking for trouble. It's fine if he's looking for trouble, but he just had to find trouble with Morong Yu. You're just a heart-stirring stage cultivator, and you're just an ant in front of Morong Yu. Fuck, even if you want to die, you should find the right place. Don't drag us down with you. Jiang Lu and Chong Lu cursed in their hearts. If they were outside the sect, the two of them wouldn't stop Su Rue. But right now, no matter who it was, they had to stop this farce. Scram! Su Rue roared as he looked at Morong Yu with murderous intent. His hand made a grabbing motion, and in the next moment, a flying sword emitting a powerful aura appeared in his hand. If the two of you don't scram, don't blame me for being merciless and killing the two of you. Chong Lu and Jiang Li's faces instantly turned unsightly. They couldn't afford to offend Su Rue's backing, and the flying sword in Su Rue's hand had even caused them to suffer a loss. It was so much so that the flying sword in their hands was even destroyed by the flying sword. Su Rue, you can't afford to offend Brother Morong, so I advise you not to create trouble. Jiang Lu said with a gloomy face. Scram, do you believe that I won't kill the two of you? Both of you are trash, losers. Su Rue strode over with murderous intent, and the flying sword in his hand emitted a powerful killing intent. Jiang Lu and Li Wuyo's faces turned even more unsightly. When the two of them had treasures, they weren't a match for the other party's spiritual artifact, not to mention now that they had nothing in their hands. The two of you scram. I want to see what qualifications this bastard has to be so arrogant. Murong Yu was enraged as he pulled Jianglu and Li Wuyo aside and faced the other party head-on. Brother Murong, Chonglu and Li Wuyo were shocked. This matter has nothing to do with the two of you. Since this bastard dared to provoke me, I will definitely teach him a lesson today. Don't worry, I know my limits, and I won't kill him. Su Rue was in the early phase of the heartbeat realm, and even if he was stronger than Murong Yu, there was a limit to it. In a situation where the difference in their dragon energy wasn't too big, Murong Yu was confident that he could beat Su Rue up. Haha! Hearing Murong Yu's words, Su Rue and his scoundrel friend burst into laughter. All of them looked at Murong Yu as if they were looking at an idiot. Behind Murong Yu, Chonglu and Li Wuyo were also looking at Su Rue and his friends with pitiful eyes. Since the matter had already reached this stage, the two of them relaxed and waited to see how Murong Yu would deal with these idiots. Kneel! Su Rue roared as his boundless aura enveloped Murong Yu, wanting to force Murong Yu to kneel. Murong Yu coldly snorted. He had even experienced the aura of an immortal, so how could he be afraid of the aura of a mere heartbeat realm cultivator? Bastard! Today, I will teach you not to look down on others. Open your dog eyes and see who you can't afford to offend. You're courting death. Su Rue roared as he stretched out his hand to grab Murong Yu. Murong Yu sneered as his figure flashed and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Su Rue. Then, Murong Yu fiercely punched Su Rue's abdomen. Bang! Murong Yu's fist, which contained 50 of Heavenly Lion's strength, instantly exploded and sent Su Rue flying. Ah! Su Rue let out a miserable shriek as he flew out like a broken rag doll. At this moment, Murong Yu was using the soldier formula. His body was as fast as lightning as he chased after Lu Li Bang. Bang! Bang! Murong Yu attacked Su Rue with both fists and kicks. The sound of his fists hitting flesh was extremely shocking. On the other hand, Su Rue's miserable shriek was like a pig being slaughtered, causing one's hair to stand on end. Seeing this scene, Chonglu and the rest were shocked. Chonglu and Su Rue were shocked that Murong Yu was still so ferocious even without the help of the golden skeleton. On the other hand, Su Rue's side was shocked that Murong Yu, who was only in the revolving reflection stage, was able to beat Su Rue, who was in the heartbeat stage, to the point that he couldn't even retaliate. Crack! Crack! Are accompanied by the sound of bones breaking and Su Rue's miserable shriek. It was extremely terrifying. Bang! A black figure flashed across the sky and landed in front of Chong Lu and the rest. It was a person. Yes, they could barely make out the appearance of a person. That person's face was beaten to the point that it looked like a pig's head. The corners of his eyes were cracked, and his chin was crooked. This must be Murong Yu's punishment for looking down on others and speaking rudely. In fact, Su Rue's 4 limbs were the most miserable. They were all broken by Murong Yu. Chapter 102. When Su Rue fell in front of Chong Lu and the others, he was already foaming at the mouth and his eyes were rolled back. He was already breathing more than he was exhaling. Murong Yu clapped his hands and leisurely walked over. Looking at Su Rue, who was foaming at the mouth, he seemed to be in a bad mood and kicked Su Rue in front of the others. The others looked at Murong Yu as if they had seen a ghost. Their hearts were filled with shock. A revolving reflection stage cultivator actually beat a heartbeat stage cultivator to the point that he didn't even have the strength to fight back. Is he still human? Is he still human? Hey, wake up. Let's go. Murong Yu patted the dazed Murong Yu awake. Chong Lu and Jiang Lu wiped the saliva from their mouths. Then, they looked deeply at Murong Yu and turned to leave. Who is he? How did he beat senior brother Su to such a state? Looking at the backs of Murong Yu and the others, Su Rue and the others were shocked. Did you guys hear? Chong Lu called that person Brother Murong. His surname is Murong. Could he be the infamous Murong Yu who betrayed Zushinzong? Suddenly, someone said in shock. Very likely. They are all revolving reflection stage cultivators. They are fierce people who can even kill tribulation passing stage cultivators. It is normal for senior brother Su to be beaten up. It's actually Murong Yu. After guessing Murong Yu's identity, everyone's expression became ugly. Of all people to offend, they had to offend this killing god. What should they do if he holds a grudge against them? The group looked at each other with apprehension in their hearts. Damn it, you bastards, hurry up and save me. At this time, Surue slowly woke up and found himself lying on the ground like a dead dog. The fools around him looked at each other in dismay. Suddenly, he flew into a rage. However, because he had cursed loudly, the wound at the corner of his mouth had split open, and he was in so much pain that he started to curse again and again. Everyone was startled as they hurriedly gave Surue medicine in a fluster. On the other side, Chonglu and Jianglu were shocked to the extreme and didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, Chonglu looked at Murong Yu and said, "Brother Murong, can I ask you a question?" "What question?" Murong Yu was already used to these two fellows being surprised. "I want to ask, are you still a human?" Bang! Just as Chonglu asked that question, Murong Yu extended a leg and sent him flying. "Of course I am a human. Do you think I look like a demon?" Chonglu immediately scampered back, laughing mischievously. "I really wonder if you're really only at the revolving reflection stage? That speed was simply too freakish." Surue is a heart-stirring stage cultivator, but he didn't even have the chance to fight back in front of you. Chonglu and Jianglu were both shocked. They and Surue were sworn enemies. 3 days ago, their flying swords and magic treasures were destroyed by Surue. But Murong Yu was able to beat Surue half to death with his bare hands. This was the difference between them. I only caught him by surprise. Murong Yu waved his hand. In fact, Murong Yu did catch Surue by surprise. But if he didn't have a powerful backing, even if he managed to sneak attack Surue, he wouldn't have been able to injure him. Thus, this time, he wasn't just lucky. "But you beat Surue?" Jianglu said with a worried expression. "What's there to be afraid of? I, Murong Yu, am not even afraid of the entire Zushinzong. Why would I be afraid of a small backer?" Murong Yu said casually. To be honest, he wasn't afraid at all. Even if the sky collapsed, he would be able to create a new world. "That's true. You even killed the elder of Zushinzong. What's there to be afraid of?" Chonglu and Jianglu looked at each other and heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts. Qingxian Peak was an independent peak in the Hidden Fairy Valley. The owner of this peak was the Hidden Fairy Valley's new saintess, Zhao Jiqing. In fact, there were many independent peaks like this in the Hidden Fairy Valley. The head disciple, saintess, and other disciples all had their own peaks. Chonglu and Jianglu brought Murong Yu to the bottom of Qingxian Peak and didn't dare to trespass. This was because every peak belonged to the owner of the peak. Ordinary disciples were absolutely forbidden from trespassing. Otherwise, they would have to bear the consequences. Thus, even though there wasn't anyone guarding the foot of the mountain, Chonglu and Jianglu still followed the rules and didn't dare to go up the mountain. Murong Yu looked up. Qingxian Peak was far inferior to the nearby peaks that had been in operation for a long time, whether it was in terms of spiritual energy or prosperity. At best, this mountain was nothing more than an ordinary mountain. Murong Yu naturally knew that this wasn't because the Hidden Fairy Valley didn't like Zhao Jiqing. It was because Zhao Jiqing had only been a saintess for 3 months and didn't have the time to visit Qingxian Peak. Once Zhao Jiqing started to recruit disciples, Qingxian Peak would become more and more lively. This so-called recruitment of disciples wasn't a true disciple. After becoming a disciple of Qingxian Peak, they would still be a disciple of the Hidden Fairy Valley. However, compared to other disciples, these disciples would not only enjoy the treatment of the Hidden Fairy Valley disciples, but also the treatment of Qingxian Peak. Furthermore, once Zhao Jiqing became the leader of the Hidden Fairy Valley, Qingxian Peak would naturally become the leader of the Hidden Fairy Valley. There are many benefits. Hidden Fairy Valley disciples Chonglu and Jianglu request to see Sister Zhao. Chonglu and the other two stood at the foot of the peak and transmitted their voices. However, after a long time, there was no response from the peak. Murong Yu waited impatiently for a few more times, but there was still no response from the higher-ups. "Come, let's go up." Murong Yu called out to the two of them. Then, in a flash, he rushed up. "Brother Murong, you can't do that." Chong Lu and Jiang Lu were about to stop him, but Murong Yu had already rushed up. In the end, the two of them could only sigh and follow him. "Who is it? How dare you trespass on Qingxian Peak?" Qingxian Peak wasn't very high. With the speed of Murong Yu and the other two, it didn't take long for them to reach the peak. However, just as Murong Yu's head appeared, there was a delicate shout from above. Then there was a sound of something breaking through the air. A sword radiance shot towards Murong Yu's head like lightning. Murong Yu narrowed his eyes. A murderous intent flashed across his brows. He reached out with his large hand, and black energy swirled around his fist. Then he fiercely punched at the flying sword that was coming at him. Murong Yu's physical body had reached the level of a first-grade spiritual weapon. With such a punch, the incoming flying sword would definitely be destroyed by Murong Yu's punch. Just as Murong Yu was about to shatter the flying sword with a single punch, he suddenly stopped. However, at this moment, Murong Yu suddenly turned his fist into a claw. He reached out his hand and grabbed the flying sword. "How dare you, madman!" Right at that moment, a woman dressed in red rushed out from the nearby forest. She was glaring at Murong Yu with fury written all over her face. "Madman, let go of my flying sword. Otherwise, I'll kill you." The red-clothed woman furiously glared at Murong Yu. Her body trembled uncontrollably, as if she was extremely furious. Murong Yu looked over and saw that it was a girl of about 16 or 17 years old. She was very attractive. Her voluptuous figure was set off by her red clothes, making her look even more impressive. However, the girl's face was murderous. However, even so, it couldn't hide her fiery figure and beauty. Murong Yu held the flying sword in one hand and looked at the girl in red with a smile. "Woman, you are too rude. Not only did you sneak attack us, but I've already taken your flying sword. Do you still want me to return it to you? You trespassed on Qingxian Peak. You deserve to die," the girl in red said angrily. "I heard that Qingxian Peak belongs to your saint. You are not the saint. You have no right to say that," Murong Yu said indifferently. The girl in red was angry and said coldly, "You lecher. Our senior sister will not see you. Leave Qingxian Peak immediately." "I'll say the same thing again. You're not the saint. How do you know that she will not see me?" Murong Yu smiled and looked around. He found that this place was still a little barren. However, there were a few buildings in front. Who was making a ruckus here? A girl in green walked over slowly and looked at Murong Yu and the others coldly. Perhaps the noise here alerted the people in the house. At this time, people came over one after another. It was a group of women. Moreover, their strength was not very high. "Senior sister, not only did these three trespass on Qingxian Peak, they also took my flying sword," the girl in red said with grievance. Murong Yu looked around and found that Zhao Jiqing was not among these people. "The two of you are disciples of the Hidden Fairy Valley. You are not a disciple of the Hidden Fairy Valley. Don't you know that trespassing on Qingxian Peak is a capital offense?" The girl in green looked coldly at Murong Yu and the others. Although Chong Lu and Jiang Lu were heartbeat stage cultivators, they were strangely silent at this time. It could be said that they had placed all their hopes on Murong Yu. Murong Yu faintly smiled. With a wave of his hand, he deflected the red-clothed woman's flying sword. Then, he scanned the crowd and suddenly said, "Jiqing, your big brother Murong Yu is here. Are you still not coming out? How dare you? Where did this lecher come from? How dare he call the saintess by her name?" Hearing this, the surrounding people were furious and glared at Murong Yu. Only Chong Lu and Jiang Lu were calm. "All of you back down." At this time, a beautiful voice like that of an oriole came from afar. Then, a person in white slowly walked over. "Saintess, your highness." The girls hurriedly bowed. As for Chong Lu and Jiang Lu, their faces were filled with excitement. Only Murong Yu looked at the person with a smile. The person who came was Zhao Jiqing, the master of Qingxian Peak and one of the saintesses of the Hidden Fairy Valley. Qingxian Peak was not very big. It was only about a few dozen miles wide. Chapter 103. At this moment, on the highest peak of Qingxian Peak, a young man in white and a young man in black stood side by side, looking into the distance. The wind from the peak of the mountain fluttered their clothes, messed up their hair, and messed up their hearts. These two people were none other than the new saintess of the Hidden Fairy Valley, Zhao Jiqing and Murongyu. Looking at the rolling clouds in front of them, the scenery was infinitely beautiful. Murongyu turned his head and looked tenderly at Zhao Jiqing, who was dressed in white and looked like a fairy descending from the nine heavens. Suddenly, he reached out his hand and gently tidied up Zhao Jiqing's hair that was messed up by the mountain peak. Zhao Jiqing looked at Murongyu and smiled. Looking at Zhao Jiqing's beautiful smile, Murongyu was stunned. He looked at Zhao Jiqing in a daze and even forgot to put his hand down. Zhao Jiqing laughed softly. "What's wrong? Is there something on my face? Look at my motionless face." Zhao Jiqing said with a smile. "You're too beautiful," Murongyu said with a smile. Hearing this, Zhao Jiqing's face blushed. She had always been very confident in her beauty. Moreover, since young, no matter where she went, there were always countless people following by her side, just because she was as beautiful as a flower. There were countless words that praised her beauty, and some of them were much more beautiful than Murongyu's simple words. However, Zhao Jiqing was as cold as ice and did not care at all. So what if you said it with extravagant words? She, Zhao Jiqing, was still expressionless. However, when you're too beautiful, this sentence that could not be more ordinary came from Murongyu's mouth. Zhao Jiqing felt very happy and happy. There was even some shyness and happiness. There were some words that would not change a person's mind, even if you said them in an earth-shattering manner. However, some very ordinary words, when spoken by certain people, sounded better than any other words in the world. Murongyu sighed in his heart. He had not seen Zhao Jiqing for more than 2 years. The current Zhao Jiqing was even more beautiful than before. Moreover, she was noble and generous. No wonder so many people wanted to pursue Zhao Jiqing. On the contrary, he looked at himself. Although he was infamous, he had matured a lot. However, he didn't become more handsome. Murongyu inwardly cursed at himself. "I heard that many young geniuses are pursuing you recently." Murongyu gazed towards the distant clouds and spoke in a low voice. Zhao Jiqing looked up at Murongyu and said playfully, "What? Are you worried?" Murongyu retracted his gaze and looked at Zhao Jiqing. He nodded and said, "I'm very worried. You're too beautiful. Many people will pursue you because of your beauty. You're too naive. In this cultivation world where the strong prey on the weak, I'm afraid you'll suffer. You're too nice. I'm afraid you won't be able to tell who the bad guys are." Zhao Jiqing looked at Murongyu and smiled sweetly. "With you here, I'm not afraid of anything. You don't have to worry. I won't even open my eyes to look at those people. In my heart, there will only be you." At the same time, Zhao Jiqing lowered her head, her face flushed red with shyness. Hearing this, Murongyu was touched. He grabbed Zhao Jiqing's hand and said, "Don't worry. As long as I'm here, I won't allow anyone to hurt you." "No one." However, Murongyu sighed and continued, "Now I've offended Zuxianzong and Yuan Su sect. I'm practically an enemy of the entire world. I have faith in you." Zhao Jiqing smiled sweetly. "Jiqing, I want you to promise me one thing." Murongyu grabbed Zhao Jiqing's soft hand and looked at her with a serious expression. Zhao Jiqing blushed and shyly wanted to pull her hand back. However, she was reluctant and finally nodded shyly. "My enemies are very strong. However, I'm strong enough to protect myself. In the future, no matter what danger I encounter, even if you hear about my death, don't rush to avenge me or look for me. Do you understand?" "Why?" Zhao Jiqing looked up at Murongyu, her eyes full of confusion. "I'm afraid those people will attack you. In the future, if I'm not in danger, I'll come to you. However, if I'm in danger, you definitely can't come to me. I don't want you to be in danger." Zhao Jiqing didn't say anything and only shook her head. "If I'm in danger, will you come to save me regardless of the danger?" Morongyu nodded. Zhao Jiqing continued. "You came to save me, but why didn't I come to you? Why didn't I come to save you?" Morongyu was silent. He had to convince Zhao Jiqing. Otherwise, this silly girl would definitely be in danger in the future. Morongyu didn't want her to be in danger. "Morong, since it's so dangerous outside, why don't you stay in Qingxian Peak? Even if you don't join the hidden fairy valley, you can still stay in Qingxian Peak. You'll be safe here." Morongyu shook his head and looked at Zhao Jiqing, slowly saying, "Jiqing, do you remember when I was young? I was a good-for-nothing who couldn't cultivate. Do you remember what I wished for at that time?" Zhao Jiqing nodded and memories of her childhood flashed through her mind, bit by bit, clear as day. "At that time, I longed for the day when I could have great power. However, I'm still a good-for-nothing. If it wasn't for a chance encounter that allowed me to cultivate, I'd still be a good-for-nothing. Now that I've finally been able to cultivate, how can I hide here and not go out? Admittedly, it's very dangerous outside. However, there's always danger and opportunity. In this world, if you want to have great power, it's not enough to just rely on hard work. You have to fight. Only through fighting can you quickly increase your strength. Moreover, you know my character. If I can't win, I'll run. I cherish my life very much," Morongyu said with a smile. Zhao Jiqing didn't say anything and only looked at Morongyu quietly. She understood Morongyu. Once he decided on something, he couldn't change it. "That's right, this is my soul crystal. Once I die, the soul crystal will shatter. As long as the soul crystal doesn't shatter, I'll be safe. You don't have to worry." Morongyu took out a jade slip and handed it to Zhao Jiqing. Zhao Jiqing carefully took it, as if this jade slip was Murongyu's soul. Soon after, 11 storage pouches appeared in Murongyu's hand. These were the storage pouches he'd obtained after killing those cultivators. In each of the 10 storage bags, there's 10 million recovery pills, a total of 100 million recovery pills. And in this storage bag, there's a sword, 8 trigrams immortal robe, an immortal-grade immortal robe. There's an immortal-grade flying sword and dozens of different grade spirit weapons. These are all for you. Zhao Jiqing was shocked. She didn't take these storage bags, but looked at Morongyu with a horrified expression. "What's wrong?" Morongyu asked softly. "Morong, how did you get these things? If you give these to me, what will you do?" Zhao Jiqing didn't want to take them, thinking that these were all Murongyu's things. Immortal-grade spirit weapons, 100 million recovery pills. Was this something a revolving radiant stage cultivator could take out? Not to mention immortal grade spirit weapons. These were things that even the 10 great sects didn't have. Even if it was 100 million recovery pills, even an ordinary small sect wouldn't be able to take out so many. "Don't worry, these are only a part of it. I'll naturally keep a part for myself." "Really?" Zhao Jiqing took the 11 storage bags, half believing and half doubting. Morongyu nodded, watching Zhao Jiqing put the 11 storage bags into her own storage bag. "I got these things from the depths of the Demon Mountain. There are still a lot of pills. If you don't think it's enough, I can give you some more." Zhao Jiqing quickly shook her head. "It's enough. Don't use those immortal grade spirit weapons for now. Don't get into trouble because of your wealth. But that 8 trigrams immortal robe, you can wear it after it recognizes you as its owner. With this immortal robe on you, I'll be relieved." Zhao Jiqing took out the 8 trigrams immortal robe, dripped blood on it to recognize it as its owner, and then put it on. Like the purple ribbon immortal robe, the 8 trigrams immortal robe could change at will. But Zhao Jiqing hid it in her body. Once she was attacked, the 8 trigrams immortal robe would naturally appear to resist the attack. After giving the 8 trigrams immortal robe to Zhao Jiqing, Morongyu finally breathed a sigh of relief. After entering the cultivation world and realizing the dangers of the cultivation world, Morongyu had been worried about Zhao Jiqing's safety. Now, Zhao Jiqing had become the saintess of the hidden fairy valley and had an immortal-grade spirit weapon. At the very least, she had the ability to protect herself. Now, Muron, you could also explore the outside world with peace of mind. Zhanglu, get down here. At this moment, a loud voice came from below Qingxian Peak. It was very ear-piercing. Murong Yu and Zhao Jiqing frowned slightly, especially Zhao Jiqing. There was a trace of anger between her brows. I'm afraid they're here to find trouble with me. Murong Yu smiled embarrassedly at Zhao Jiqing. No matter who it is, if they dare to cause trouble on Qingxian Peak, I'll teach them a lesson. Zhao Jiqing's beautiful face was filled with anger, her voice cold. The aura of the saintess of the hidden fairy valley involuntarily exuded. Murong Yu, who was at the side, looked on and nodded to himself. All along, Zhao Jiqing had been very pure and kind. It would be difficult for such a person to survive in the cultivation world. In fact, Murong Yu wished that Zhao Jiqing would be like him. Of course, she would not be like him, who killed people like scything flax. He only hoped that Zhao Jiqing would be able to survive in the cultivation world. Otherwise, if she was still the same as before, she would be easily taken advantage of. At this moment, Zhao Jiqing was indeed very angry. Not only did this voice come to Qingxian Peak to cause trouble, but it also interrupted her reunion with Murong Yu. After not seeing each other for so many years, she had a lot to say to Murong Yu. When Zhao Jiqing and Murong Yu's group landed at the foot of Qingxian Peak, there were already many disciples of the hidden fairy valley gathered at the foot of the mountain. A few of them were the most obvious. They stood at the foot of Qingxian Peak, looking arrogantly at the people of Qingxian Peak as they slowly descended. Chapter 104. One of them was Su Rue, who was beaten up by Murong Yu not long ago. But right now, Su Rue was standing there energetically, without any signs of injury. It had to be said that the pills in the cultivation world were miraculous. It would take 100 days for a mortal to recover from a bone injury, but these external injuries were nothing in the cultivation world. As long as a cultivator had ordinary pills, they would be able to recover in a short period of time. I didn't think that Saintess Zhao would personally come down the mountain. I am truly honored. Just as Murong Yu and the others came down the mountain, the eyes of a youth wearing the hidden fairy valley's disciple robes lit up. He revealed a smile that he thought was brilliant as he looked at Zhao Jiqing. When she saw the youth, Zhao Jiqing's face sunk and returned to her cold appearance. She glanced at the youth and said indifferently, Han Tao, what are you trying to do by making a ruckus at the foot of Qingxian Peak? Hearing this, Han Tao's eyes shot out two terrifying rays of light towards Chong Lu and Jiang Lu. Finally, his gaze landed on Murong Yu. Han Tao sneered and said, apart from paying a visit to the Saintess, there is also a small matter that I need to take care of. I don't know you, and I don't want to see you. You better leave immediately, or don't blame me for being impolite. Zhao Jiqing coldly interrupted Han Tao. Han Tao was startled, and a sinister killing intent flashed across his face. On the surface, he maintained his smile. In reality, at this moment, his heart was burning with rage and killing intent. He was a core disciple of the hidden fairy valley. What was a core disciple? Only after reaching the spirit severing stage would one have the qualifications to become a core disciple of the hidden fairy valley. The 10 great sects were the same. In other words, the core disciples of the 10 great sects were at least at the spirit severing stage. On that day, Murong Yu was intercepted by a small sect of the Greenlight sect. Among their sects, the strongest was only at the severed soul stage. Any one of the successor disciples of the 10 great sects was enough to establish a sect outside. Although Zhao Jiqing was the holy maiden of the hidden fairy valley, her strength was low, and she was only at the revolving reflection stage. How could he not be angry when he was treated in such a manner? However, although Zhao Jiqing's strength was low, the status of a holy maiden was higher than that of a true disciple. Brian smiled and said, since the Saintess doesn't welcome me, I won't stay any longer. However, before I leave, I still need to do a small matter. As he spoke, Han Tao's eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared at Murongyu. Then he stretched out his hand and grabbed at Murongyu. Han Tao, you are courting death. Seeing that Han Tao dared to make a move in front of her, Zhao Jiqing, who knew how strong the opponent was, immediately changed her expression. She shouted angrily, and her figure flashed in front of Murongyu. On the other hand, Murongyu's figure flashed as he executed the soldier formula and turned into a streak of light, disappearing from the spot. Competing in speed? Even Han Tao, who was at the severed soul stage, was no match for him. Of course, Murongyu was fast. However, once Han Tao attacked, it would be difficult for him to dodge with his current strength. Seeing Murongyu retreat like a ghost, Brian couldn't help but be shocked. When he saw Zhao Jiqing blocking in front of Murongyu, he was even more shocked. This bitch! Han Tao was furious, but he had to withdraw his hand. Although he was a successor disciple of the Hidden Fairy Valley, he did not dare to hurt Zhao Jiqing. After all, Zhao Jiqing was the saintess of the sect. At least, in the Hidden Fairy Valley, if he dared to hurt Zhao Jiqing, he would face the most severe punishment. Moreover, Zhao Jiqing was deeply loved by Huangfu Ranxue and the sect leader of the Hidden Fairy Valley. She was the most popular person in the Hidden Fairy Valley. If he dared to attack Zhao Jiqing, he would not have a good ending. Han Tao, you have the guts to ignore the sect rules and openly attack me in Qingxian Peak. Attacking the saintess, how should you be punished? Zhao Jiqing's pretty face was filled with anger, and she looked at Han Tao with a murderous look. So what if he was a severed soul stage cultivator? Zhao Jiqing's strength was not as good as Han Tao. However, she knew how to use her identity and the rules of the Hidden Fairy Valley to maximize her benefits. Han Tao's heart was filled with murderous intent, and he wanted to slap Zhao Jiqing to death. However, on the surface, his face was filled with a brilliant smile. Saintess, you must be joking. Why would I, Han Tao, attack the saintess? However, Han Tao's face became gloomy. I heard that recently there were spies from other sects who sneaked into the Hidden Fairy Valley and tried to sow discord between the sect and the other sections. Their intentions are terrible. I heard that someone had sneaked into Qingxian Peak. Saintess, you have a pure heart. I was afraid that you would be tricked, so I wanted to capture that person and interrogate him. He is my relative, not a spy like you said. Zhao Jiqing looked at Han Tao with a gloomy face. Saintess, you have just entered the cultivation world, so you don't have a deep understanding of this sinister cultivation world. Even if he is your relative, he will still harm you in the end. Moreover, even if he is your relative, he may be trying to sow discord between the sect and the other sects because of his relationship with you. Therefore, I should capture this person and hand him over to the sect for interrogation. If it is proven that he has no other motives, we will naturally not continue to make things difficult for him. Otherwise, how are you going to answer to the sect? I will say it again. He is my relative, and he will not harm the sect. Moreover, this is my Qingxian Peaks matter. Even if something happens, I, Zhao Jiqing, will take responsibility. Han Tao, are you doubting me by saying so much nonsense? Are you doubting the saintess's judgment? Or are you doubting the judgment of the sect master and the other elders? Han Tao's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He had come in a threatening manner because he wanted to capture Murongyu. However, he did not expect this new saintess to have such a sharp tongue. Even if Han Tao was a direct disciple, he would not be able to take such a big accusation. Haha, since the saintess said that he is your relative, I will not doubt it. Han Tao laughed and said. However, at the same time, he looked coldly at Murongyu, who was walking toward him again, and said with a cold smile, is it just that some men only dare to hide behind a woman and let her take the lead? In fact, Murongyu was already unhappy in his heart. However, he heard Zhao Jiqing's voice transmission, telling him not to take the lead and to let her handle this matter. Therefore, after Murongyu dodged Han Tao's attack, he did not say anything. However, looking at Han Tao's aggressive appearance, he was already gnashing his teeth in anger. However, Zhao Jiqing repeatedly transmitted to him to calm down, and he also knew that Han Tao's strength was much greater than his. If he did not use the golden skeleton, he was really not Han Tao's opponent. However, at this time, Murong Yu finally could not hold back. He was said to be a man who only knew how to hide behind a woman and be protected by a woman. This made him somewhat angry. However, the angry him knew that if he did not stand up today, Han Tao would never let him go. Rather than this, he might as well stand up and have a fierce fight with Han Tao. At worst, he would just release the golden skeleton and kill Han Tao. Han Tao, you're still so shameless. A dignified, true disciple, a spirit-severing cultivator, actually dares to bully a revolving reflection cultivator? You really give us, the true disciples of the hidden Fairy Valley, face. Just as Murong Yu was about to go out and have a fierce fight with Han Tao, a disdainful voice came from afar. In the next moment, a figure quickly flew over from afar and finally landed between the two sides. So fast. Seeing this, everyone nearby was shocked. However, Han Tao's face darkened. Lu Jun. Han Tao gritted his teeth and looked at the white-robed Lu Jun, a trace of resentment flashing in his eyes. The person who came was called Lu Jun, one of the true disciples of the hidden Fairy Valley. His cultivation was at the early stage of the crossing calamity stage. Speaking of this Lu Jun, he and Han Tao were sworn enemies. In fact, the two seemed to have a relationship of blood and brothers, and their strength was on par. However, later on, for some unknown reason, the two turned against each other, and later on, they fought openly and secretly. However, 10 years ago, Lu Jun actually broke through to the unification stage first, and his strength was 10 streets ahead of Han Tao. Since then, the two did not have any more fights. In fact, Han Tao knew that he was no longer Lu Jun's opponent. So it's Senior Lu. After seeing the person who came, Zhao Jiqing secretly sighed in relief. She had met Lu Jun a few times, and his reputation among the true disciples was not bad. Lu Jun nodded to Zhao Jiqing, and then looked at Han Tao. Han Tao, how about I meet you today? Haven't you always bullied the weak with your strength? Today, I'll let you have a taste of it. As he spoke, Lu Jun took a step forward, and a fierce aura appeared on his body and rushed towards Han Tao. Han Tao's face instantly turned ugly. I won't lower myself to your level. With a cold snort, Han Tao turned into a stream of light and left. However, at this time, Han Tao's voice rang in Murong Yu's ears. Boy, you'd better stay in Qingxian Peak for the rest of your life. Otherwise, once you leave the hidden Fairy Valley, it will be the day you die. Murong Yu sneered. Bastard, if you dare to lay a hand on me, see if I don't kill you. Damn it. Murong Yu was furious. At this moment, he really wanted to release the golden skeleton and kill Han Tao directly. This bastard was really too disgusting. Goodbye. Lu Jun and Zhao Jiqing exchanged a few words, then turned and left. Zhao Jiqing sighed in relief, but deep in her eyes, there was a flash of worry. In the Hichu, Luoshu world, Murong Yu sat on the ground, and opposite him stood Hichu. Murong Yu frowned slightly as he looked at Hichu, but his face was somewhat dignified. After entering the cultivation world for more than 2 years, his cultivation had reached the revolving reflection stage. This progress was already very fast. Moreover, Murong Yu went from trash to his current cultivation in less than 3 years. This progress was very shocking. Compared to people of the same generation, or even older than Murong Yu is undoubtedly very strong. The power of 50 Pan Liang, his cultivation was close to that of a heartbeat stage cultivator. Chapter 105. Ever since the Demon Mountain trial, he had come into contact with the top existences in the cultivation world. Meng Nan, the half-immortal Zhuang Ningguang, and even the first step immortal had made a move against Murong Yu. These high and mighty existences gave Murong Yu a lot of pressure. It was also from them that Murong Yu felt how small and insignificant he was. The current him could only be regarded as a rookie who had just entered the cultivation world. The vast majority of cultivators could see him as an ant. Not long ago, the incident at Qingshan Peak had stimulated Murongyu. Murongyu was now infamous in the cultivation world. Even a few of the crossing calamity stage Elder Zushinzong had been killed by him. However, this was not Murongyu's own strength. The greater his fame, the greater the pressure on Murongyu. The greater the pressure, the more he thirsted for power. Therefore, when he came to Qingshan Peak, Murongyu immediately announced that he would go into seclusion. This time, he had to improve his strength. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to move forward in the cultivation world. Burn the pills and accelerate time to the maximum speed. This time, I must break through to the middle stage of revolving reflection. Murongyu decided and said. Hichu nodded, and his figure flashed and left. In the distance, a river of pills was grabbed by Hichu from the independent space and then directly burned. Powerful as a sea of terrifying yuan qi erupted. Hichu Luoshu's world was immediately accelerated by 20 times. Murongyu sat cross-legged on the ground. His hands grabbed the air, and 2 rivers of pills were grabbed by him. Then, he opened his mouth wide and swallowed the pills like a whale swallowing water. Within his body, countless pills spread out. Powerful and huge yuan qi instantly filled every meridian and every inch of muscle in Murongyu's body. Murongyu took a deep breath and immediately operated the chaotic celestial record. He guided the surging energy in his meridians and began to break through to the next realm. Like a torrent of power, it continuously filled every inch of space within Murongyu's body. Under his guidance and refinement, the power in his body became even more turbulent and condensed. The elixirs were continuously swallowed into Murongyu's body, refined and refined by him. During this process, Murongyu's meridians were further widened by him, and his body, which was at the level of a spirit tool, became even more powerful. At this time, within Murongyu's dantian, the 9 black lotus seeds began to emit a faint halo. They had already grown from their original small size to the size of soybeans. Time passed slowly, and a month passed just like that. On this day, when the 9 black lotus seeds in Murongyu's body grew to the size of a little finger, rumble, a loud explosion erupted from Murongyu's body. Finally, he'd broken through the bottleneck that he'd spent an entire month trying to break through to the mid-revolving radiant realm. Rumble. Murongyu's body fiercely erupted with an aura that was more than 10 times stronger than before. At the same time, 50 extremely condensed black, coiled dragon phantoms appeared out of thin air above his head. Rumble. After the 50 dragon shadows appeared, there was an explosion in the air, and the 51st dragon shadow appeared. Rumble, rumble, rumble. With the continuous explosions in the air, more and more dragon shadows appeared. After a long time, the number of dragon shadows above Murongyu's head no longer increased. Taking a closer look, Murongyu saw that there were a total of 60 coiling dragons floating above his head. Middle stage of the revolving radiance realm, 60 dragon shadows. If outsiders were to see Murongyu's dragon strength, they would be incomparably shocked. Generally speaking, a late-stage revolving radiance realm cultivator would have at most 20 dragon shadows. But Murongyu was only at the middle stage of the revolving radiance realm, and he already had the dragon strength that many middle-stage heart-stirring realm cultivators could not reach. One could imagine how powerful Murongyu's strength was. If Murongyu continued to break through, then his strength would become more and more powerful. The dragon shadows slowly dissipated, and the black flowing light on Murongyu's body once again entered his body. However, Murongyu still sat cross-legged on the ground and did not end his cultivation. Looking from afar, Murongyu's aura had become even more powerful, and his entire body was filled with vitality, and his energy was very vigorous. Not long after, Murongyu stood up. After feeling the changes in his body, Murongyu could not help but look up to the sky and roar. Middle stage of the revolving radiance realm, 60 dragon shadows. My lifespan has increased by 5,000 years, reaching 25,000 years. Murong-Yu's voice was filled with surprise and excitement. As his strength grew stronger, his lifespan also grew longer. This caused Murong-Yu's confidence to be unprecedentedly strong. With enough lifespan and enough resources for him to squander, as long as he had enough time, he would definitely be able to trample the entire cultivation world under his feet. At this moment, Murong-Yu was in high spirits. His figure flashed, and Murong-Yu left the Hichu Luoshu world and appeared on Qingxian Peak. Using his divine consciousness, he strode towards one of the great halls on Qingxian Peak. Qingxian Peak was Zhao Jiqing's private territory. Here, Murong-Yu did not have any restrictions and could go anywhere he wanted. In fact, there were only a few dozen people in the entire Qingxian Peak, and there were only a few buildings, so there were no secrets at all. As soon as he stepped into the large hall, the gazes of the dozen people in the hall all turned towards Murong-Yu. Looking at him like this, these people's faces revealed a look of surprise. A day ago, Murong-Yu was only at the early stage of the revolving reflection realm, but in a day he had actually broken through to the middle stage of the revolving reflection realm. This caused everyone present to be shocked, and they were all shocked by Murong-Yu's terrifying breakthrough. Zhao Jiqing's pair of beautiful eyes flashed with a moving expression as she looked at Murong-Yu. "Hi, everyone." Seeing that everyone's gazes were focused on him, Murong-Yu just smiled and then greeted everyone. Humph! Most of the people nodded to Murong-Yu. Only the red-clothed woman just snorted coldly and glared at Murong-Yu with a look of dissatisfaction. Murong-Yu did not care and leisurely walked to the back of the hall and sat down in a seat right below Zhao Jiqing, and then smiled at everyone and said, "Everyone, don't worry about me. Go do what you need to do. I'll pretend that I didn't see anything." It was obvious that the dozen people of Qingxian Peak had gathered together to discuss something. Murong-Yu's skin was a bit thick, relying on Zhao Jiqing. He did not avoid arousing suspicion. Everyone's faces showed traces of awkward smiles. After all, Murong-Yu was an outsider, and the things they wanted to discuss were not good to continue discussing in front of him. However, due to Zhao Jiqing's face, no one dared to say anything. However, just because they did not dare to say anything, it did not mean that no one dared to say anything. Humph! We're discussing the matters of Qingxian Peak. You are not a disciple of Qingxian Peak. What are you doing here? The red-clothed woman still held a grudge against Murong-Yu for stealing her sword that day, and immediately said coldly. Murong-Yu was too lazy to pay attention to her, and his whole body slouched on the chair and actually closed his eyes to rest. Seeing this scene, everyone felt that it was funny. For a moment, they couldn't connect the Murong-Yu in the hall with the infamous person they'd heard of in the outside world. However, the red-clothed woman looked at Murong-Yu with gritted teeth, as if she wanted to pounce on Murong-Yu and bite him to death. Zhao Jiqing only smiled and said, "Let's continue." Although Murong-Yu looked like he was resting with his eyes closed, was he really resting with his eyes closed? However, as he listened to the chatter in the hall, he felt very relaxed, so he completely relaxed. Zhao Jiqing and the rest continued to discuss nothing more than how to develop Qingxian Peak, how to attract the disciples of the Hidden Fairy Valley to join Qingxian Peak, and so on. However, after a long discussion, there was no conclusion. However, at this moment, a soft snoring sound was heard in the main hall. Looking over, they realized that the snoring sound was coming from Murong-Yu. As a result, all the women in the main hall, including Zhao Jiqing, could not help but be shocked. Was this guy really the infamous Murong-Yu that was rumored to be out there? He actually fell asleep in the main hall without any preparation. Seeing this, the red-clothed woman could no longer hold it in. She immediately screamed, "Murong-Yu!" Her high-pitched and sharp voice went straight into the ears of the sleeping Murong-Yu. Murong-Yu was immediately awakened and saw that he suddenly jumped up from the chair. His sleepy eyes revealed a vigilant look as he scanned the surroundings and said loudly, "Who is it? Who is calling me?" Brother Murong, you're drooling. Zhao Jiqing looked at Murong Yu and laughed. Murong Yu was shocked and hurriedly reached out to touch the corner of his mouth, but did not find any drool. Then he saw the funny expressions of the women. I accidentally fell asleep. You all continue. Finally, the 10 over women in the main hall could not help but laugh. They laughed so hard that Murong Yu felt very embarrassed. You all continue. Forget it. We can't come up with anything. Let's call it a day. Zhao Jiqing waved her hand and said helplessly, well, you all just want to develop Qing Xian Peak and recruit disciples, right? I have a suggestion. I wonder if you all mind if I say it? We've been discussing for half a day without any results. What good suggestion do you have? The red-clothed woman looked at Murong Yu disdainfully. Murong Yu shrugged and only looked at Zhao Jiqing. Zhao Jiqing nodded, and so Murong Yu said his idea. Murong Yu pondered for a while, and then said, although I was sleeping just now, I could vaguely hear what you all were discussing. You all just want to develop Qing Xian Peak and recruit disciples of Qing Xian Peak. Qing Xian Peak has been established for more than 3 months. However, there are only 2 or 3 of you in the entire mountain. According to my analysis, there are only a few reasons. Looking at the crowd, Murong Yu nodded, and then said with a smile, if I'm not wrong, the 10 of you should have a good relationship before coming to Qing Xian Peak. Therefore, when Qing Xian Peak was established, you all joined Qing Xian Peak. Am I right? Chapter 106. Murong Yu looked at the red-clothed woman and said with a smile. Huawei glared fiercely at Murong Yu and coldly snorted. But she didn't say anything. Obviously, she tacitly agreed with Murong Yu's words. So, Qing Xian Peak has been established for 3 months, and besides you, no one else has joined. Why is this? Murong Yu looked at Zhao Jiqing. Zhao Jiqing smiled embarrassedly. Murong Yu obviously didn't want Zhao Jiqing and the others to answer, because he continued, Jiqing, you are one of the holy maidens. To be able to be conferred the title of Holy Maiden in the revolving reflection stage, the sect obviously sees your future potential. This is very obvious. But you're now only a revolving reflection stage cultivator. Even if your future potential is limitless, so what? Even if you're valued by the sect, so what? But your strength is too weak. Plus, you don't have the qualifications to attract others to join Qing Xian Peak. In other words, besides potential, Qing Xian Peak has nothing. We are all disciples of the hidden fairy valley, but why would we join another peak and become their branch? Other than having an expert to rely on, they also have a mountain that provides them with a large amount of resources. Unless you get a large amount of pills, magic weapons, and the like, this will attract a large number of disciples to join Qing Xian Peak. Otherwise, in another 10 years, there won't be many people joining Qing Xian Peak. Of course, if you reach the spirit severing stage or the body fusion stage within 10 years, I'm afraid there will be many disciples joining Qing Xian Peak. Zhao Jiqing nodded her head, and the rest of the crowd felt the same way. However, the red-clothed Huawei looked at Murong Yu with disdain and said, Murong Yu, you've spouted so much nonsense, but we already knew. Don't you have a method? If that's all you want to say, then don't continue. Murong Yu smiled and did not bother to argue with Huawei. He continued, Qing Xian Peak has a much denser qi of heaven and earth compared to the hidden fairy valley. As long as there is a master overseeing this place or a large amount of resources, this situation can be changed. Could it be that you can provide these 3 things? Huawei looked at Murong Yu and sneered. Of course not. Just as Huawei was about to retort, Murong Yu continued, I am unable to provide any experts. As for increasing the concentration of heaven and earth yuan qi in Qing Xian Peak, I only need to set up some spirit gathering formations here. Of course, I don't have the ability to do that either. However, Jiqing, you can ask your master, Elder Huangfu. I'm sure she'll be happy to help. As for me, I can provide you with a lot of resources, magic treasures, and even essence-returning pills. It turned out that Murong Yu wanted to provide these things to Zhao Jiqing. In fact, When he entered the main hall and heard Zhao Jiqing and the others discussing this matter, he already had a plan in his mind. After he woke up, he began to implement this plan. Now, he was an itinerant cultivator who did not belong to any sect. The resources in the Hichu Luoshu world were enough to cultivate a large group of people. And where could he cultivate these people? Murong, you chose Qing Xian Peak. Qing Xian Peak was Zhao Jiqing's power. Once this power was established, it would naturally be beneficial to Murong Yu. Moreover, if Zhao Jiqing became the leader of the Hidden Fairy Valley one day, it would be even more beneficial to Murong Yu. However, if she relied on herself, it would be extremely difficult for Zhao Jiqing to become the leader of the Hidden Fairy Valley. To become the leader, in addition to the support of some old fellows in the sect, she would also need to have her own power. The stronger Qing Xian Peak was, the more advantageous it would be for Zhao Jiqing to become the leader. Therefore, rather than saying that Murong Yu wanted to cultivate Qing Xian Peak, it was more accurate to say that he wanted to help Zhao Jiqing become a leader. Even if Zhao Jiqing was unable to succeed in the end, with Qing Xian Peak as a powerful force, Murong Yu would be able to walk freely in the cultivation world. However, it would take a very long time for Qing Xian Peak to become powerful enough to be used by Murong Yu. However, everything had to start from scratch. You provide resources? Hearing Murong Yu's words, Huawei immediately laughed coldly. Although Murong Yu was in the limelight recently, she did not think that Murong Yu would have many resources. After all, he was only an itinerant cultivator in the revolving reflection stage. Huawei was not the only one who thought so. Even the others looked at Murong Yu suspiciously. However, only Zhao Jiqing's eyes shone with a strange light. As intelligent as she was, she already vaguely understood Murong Yu's intentions. However, although she had vaguely guessed Murong Yu's thoughts, she absolutely agreed. After all, it was her wish to make Qing Xian Peak powerful. It would only be beneficial to her and not detrimental. Even if this matter did not benefit her at all, as long as it was something Murong Yu wanted to do, she would unconditionally support it. Although I don't have many resources, it is enough for the early stages. Murong Yu looked at the reserves of recovery pills in Hichu Luoshu again. Although he had burned a lot of them, they burned like a bucket of water in a vast ocean. He did not see any shortage of recovery pills at all. Moreover, besides recovery pills, there were also vital elemental pills and other elixirs. Everyone looked at Murong Yu suspiciously. They did not believe him at all. At this moment, without waiting for Huawei to speak, Murong Yu flipped his hand, and 10 storage bags appeared in his hand. Then, he waved his hand, and the storage bags flew towards everyone. There are 1 million recovery pills in each storage bag. Consider my gift to you. 1 million recovery pills. Everyone was shocked. Huawei took the storage bags with a look of disdain. Just as she was about to make sarcastic remarks, her divine consciousness had already probed into the storage bags. At this moment, she saw a small mountain of recovery pills piled up in the storage bags. The spiritual energy of the elixirs filled the entire storage bags. At this moment, Huawei opened her small mouth wide and swallowed the words of ridicule that she was about to spit out of her mouth to mock Murong Yu. Then, she exclaimed, "There really are 1 million recovery pills. Murong Yu, how do you have so many elixirs?" Huawei was shocked and looked at Murong Yu in horror. At this moment, she was convinced that the man in front of her was not bragging. He really did have the resources. 1 million. Out of the 13 people here, only Murong Yu had casually tossed out 13 million origin rejuvenation pills. That was a huge amount of wealth. The girls looked at the storage bags in their hands, then looked at Murong Yu, and then at Zhao Jiqing. While they were shocked, they were also at a loss. 1 million recovery pills. At this moment, they felt that the storage bags in their hands were as heavy as a mountain. They did not even think that if it were not for Murong Yu, would they have so many elixirs in their lifetime of cultivation? Senior sister? The girls looked at Zhao Jiqing and did not know if they should accept it. Zhao Jiqing smiled and said, "Since Brother Murong is giving it to you, just accept it. Don't be polite with him. Thank you, Brother Morong. The girls thanked Morong Yu and then hurriedly put the storage bags into their own storage bags. However, Morong Yu seemed to think that the girls weren't shocked enough as he made a grabbing motion in the air. In the next moment, 13 flying swords with powerful auras appeared in the void in front of him. High-grade magic weapons. The girls cried out in surprise. Their eyes lit up as they looked at the high-grade flying swords. Morong Yu smiled and waved his hand. Suddenly, the flying swords flew into the air. One for each of you. I'll give it to you. At this moment, the girls did not stand on ceremony with Morong Yu. After each of them chose a flying sword, they happily went to claim it as their master. Boy, you're so generous. The value of a high-grade magic artifact flying sword is probably no less than 1,000,000 origin recovery pills. At this time, Hichu and Hichu Luoshu World said with a smile, Boy, don't tell me you've taken a fancy to them and want to take them into your harem. Morong Yu rolled his eyes. I'm not a stud horse. I don't have so much energy to deal with these girls. This is called investment, do you understand? It wasn't that Morong Yu was generous enough to give out 1,000,000 medicinal pills and a high-grade flying sword to everyone he met. Even a big sect would not be able to support this. The reason why Morong Yu did this was nothing more than investment. He wanted to tell others that as long as they joined Qing Xian Peak, they would have a large number of pills and flying swords. How is it? Are you happy to receive my gift? Morong Yu looked at the girls with a smile. The girls nodded excitedly and chattered excitedly. Receiving a high-grade flying sword. I'm afraid that even the core disciples of the Hidden Fairy Valley don't receive such treatment. Looking at you guys, why don't you go outside and try out the new flying sword? Sister Zhao, I'm going to try out the new flying sword now. Huawei excitedly greeted Zhao Jiqing and then rushed outside like a ray of light. Following which, the other girls also left the main hall and went outside to try out the new flying sword. For a moment, the outside was filled with sword chi and laughter. It was very lively. As for Morong Yu, he merely smiled at Zhao Jiqing and said, Prepare to accept a disciple. In less than 3 days, there will be a large number of disciples wanting to join Qing Xian Peak. The girls excitedly tried out their swords on Qing Xian Peak. For a moment, the Qing Xian Peak was filled with sword chi and sword light. It was very lively. Originally, Qing Xian Peak was just an ordinary peak in the Hidden Fairy Valley. However, after Qing Xian Peak was bestowed with a new saintess, this place gradually became lively. However, although Zhao Jiqing was the saintess, her actual strength was too low and she did not have many resources. As a result, no one wanted to join Qing Xian Peak. However, just because no one wanted to join Qing Xian Peak did not mean that no one was paying attention to it. In fact, in these 3 months, there were many disciples secretly observing Qing Xian Peak. On this day, the originally quiet Qing Xian Peak was filled with cheers and laughter. Immediately, the nearby disciples who were observing Qing Xian Peak looked over in surprise. When they saw this, they were immediately shocked. Chapter 107. Above Qing Xian Peak, streaks of sword radiance flew across the sky. It was dazzling and powerful. In fact, what shocked them was not how powerful the girls were. In fact, the girls of Qing Xian Peak had different levels of strength. There were foundation establishment, revolving reflection, and fusion stages. The most powerful one was only heart-stirring stage. These stages were not worth mentioning at all. However, at this moment, the powerful aura coming from Qing Xian Peak was very powerful. High-grade flying sword magic artifact. Someone exclaimed when they saw the flying swords in the girls' hands. However, this was not the only thing that shocked them. Not only one of them had a high-grade magic artifact, but all 13 of them had a high-grade magic artifact. Since when did the Hidden Fairy Valley become so powerful? Each of them had a high-grade magic artifact. While everyone was shocked, they looked at their own flying swords. Not to mention high-grade magic artifacts, they were not even mid-grade magic artifacts. They were pitiful low-grade magic artifacts. In fact, in the cultivation world, which high-grade magic artifact was not worth more than 1,000,000 yuan. In countless sects, most of the cultivators used low-grade magic artifacts. Even the core disciples of the top 10 sects did not have a high-grade magic artifact. Generally speaking, only true disciples could have a high-grade magic artifact, and not everyone had one. Huawei and the other girls had high-grade flying swords in their hands. Clearly, this was not the style of the Hidden Fairy Valley, but the treatment of Qingxian Peak. While everyone was shocked, the girls on Qingxian Peak seemed to be tired of playing. Some of them seemed to have used up a lot of their inner qi. As a result, these people sat down cross-legged on the ground, took out large handfuls of medicinal pills, and directly threw them into their mouths. They ate pills as if they were eating beans. Those are essence recovery pills. Someone with sharp eyes immediately saw the pills in the girl's hands and exclaimed, "Essence recovery pills. They actually have so many essence recovery pills." Seeing the girls swallow the essence recovery pills one by one, the cultivators near Qingxian Peak swallowed their saliva with difficulty, their faces full of shock. One must know that a foundation establishment cultivator could only receive 5 essence recovery pills a month from the sect. Some of the girls on Qingxian Peak even swallowed more than 10 essence recovery pills at once. It was too extravagant. Envy, jealousy, and hatred. However, things were far more complicated than that. Some of the women on Qingxian Peak seemed to have regained their strength. However, he was still sitting cross-legged on the ground, seemingly cultivating. Time continued to pass, and the essence recovery pills were swallowed by these cultivating women one after another. Boom, boom, boom. As the pills were swallowed one after another, more and more yuan qi accumulated in the bodies of these women. After a long while, a series of loud sounds came from these women. Waves of auras that were much more powerful than before were emitted from their bodies. Their realms had actually been broken through by the spiritual energy contained in their pills. During this process, the people near Qingxian Peak did some calculations. In the process of their cultivation, some of them had even swallowed more than 100 pills, or even more. As low-level cultivators of the Hidden Fairy Valley, it was impossible for them to have so many vitality recovery pills. Because it was impossible, but now they were casually eating pills. In other words, they didn't care about these pills at all. Why didn't he care? It was most likely because they had a large number of pills on them. However, where did these pills come from? Obviously, it had something to do with Zhao Jiqing. One by one, the disciples quietly left the vicinity of Qingxian Peak. Not long after, a piece of news about Qingxian Peak spread throughout the Hidden Fairy Valley. Within Qingxian Peak, everyone had a high-grade magic weapon and was eating pills as if they were fried beans. Qingxian Peak had a large number of resources and magic weapons. In an instant, this piece of news quickly spread throughout the Hidden Fairy Valley. In the beginning, many people didn't believe it. However, the women on Qingxian Peak seemed to have intentionally or unintentionally revealed that they were selling magic weapons, flying swords, and pills. Moreover, the people on Qingxian Peak seemed to have improved their realms. Thus, they had no choice but to believe it. At this time, the news of Qingxian Peak accepting disciples also spread. Immediately, many disciples of the Hidden Fairy Valley came to Qingxian Peak. Cultivation and aptitude aren't important. What's important is loyalty and loyalty. Your aptitude can be very poor, but we have elixirs. We can use elixirs to raise your cultivation. However, I don't want all the disciples of Qingxian Peak to join us because of our resources. Even if we have endless pills that can raise a person from a low-grade cultivator to a high-grade cultivator. However, if they aren't loyal to Qingxian Peak, what do we need them for? Once we run out of resources, these people will leave Qingxian Peak immediately. Therefore, character is the most important thing when recruiting disciples. What we want is quality, not quantity. In the main hall of Qingxian Peak, Murong already treated himself as the master of this place and spoke to the 15 people in front of him. Yes, there were 15 of them. Apart from the original 13 women, there were 2 more people, Jianglu and Changlu. In any case, the two of them hadn't joined any faction, so Murong had pulled them over to Qingxian Peak. Hearing Murong Yu's words, everyone nodded secretly. Even Huawei, who had always been on bad terms with Murong Yu, didn't speak up at this time. Murong Yu's resource offensive was beginning to bear fruit. If Huawei was still the same after receiving Murong Yu's high-grade flying sword and 1,000,000 pills, then Murong Yu could only admit that his plan to win people's hearts had failed. In the early stages, resources are limited. We have to ensure that everyone who joins Qingxian Peak has resources available. Therefore, we have to control the number. In addition to considering the problem of resources, another reason is that we have to nurture the core disciples of Qingxian Peak. Qingxian Peak will become stronger and stronger, but it's not enough with just a few of you. Therefore, we need to recruit more elites, and when you're strong enough, you can control them. Moreover, I suggest that when we recruit disciples this time, it's best that their cultivation level is not higher than the heartbeat stage. Yes, considering Jiqing, try to recruit female disciples in the early stages. I've finished speaking. What do you think? After Murong Yu finished speaking, he sat down on the chair. Then, after Zhao Jiqing and the others discussed some details, they began to confirm the recruitment of disciples. Murong Yu naturally didn't worry about these. Therefore, in the following period of time, he would either go to the Hichu Luoshu world to cultivate or wander around Qingxian Peak. Zhao Jiqing and the others were busy with the recruitment of disciples, and no one cared about Murong Yu. Murong Yu was happy and carefree, and he used a few days to go to almost every corner of Qingxian Peak. This was because the recruitment of disciples had to be based on their character, and so on. Therefore, it took a full half a month's time for Qingxian Peak to recruit 100 disciples. Moreover, these 100 people were all women. Their cultivation level ranged from the foundation establishment stage to the fusion stage. No one was above the heartbeat stage. This was because if a disciple was too strong, Zhao Jiqing and the others would be in a situation where they couldn't control them. On this day, Qingxian Peak stopped recruiting disciples after recruiting 100 disciples. This action caused many to sigh in pity and curse their bad luck. On the other hand, the male cultivators all sighed. Fortunately, this was only the first time Qingxian Peak was recruiting disciples. If they wanted to join Qingxian Peak, there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. Rumble. At this moment, an earth-shattering explosion sounded from Qingxian Peak. In an instant, the earth quaked and the mountains shook. Waves of murderous intent were emitted from Qingxian Peak, shooting straight into the sky. Everyone turned pale with fright and looked in the direction of Qingxian Peak in shock. At this moment, Qingxian Peak, whose peak could be seen from afar, was now shrouded in a layer of faint white mist. Waves of murderous intent were hidden in the white mist, and it was enough to make one flinch. Rumble. Suddenly, a stone stele fell from the sky. A huge stone stele the size of a small mountain fell from Qingxian Peak. Then, it plunged into the ground below Qingxian Peak. A few blood-red words were erected on the ground along with the huge stone stele. There is an immortal sealing formation inside. Halt, or you will die. The bright red words appeared extremely glaring and sinister under the illumination of the sun. The people of Qingxian Peak looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. Disciples of Qingxian Peak, don't panic. I will teach you how to enter and exit the immortal jutting formation. Murong Yu's voice sounded. Then, a figure slowly walked down from Qingxian Peak and stopped in front of the crowd. Seeing Murong Yu, the people of Qingxian Peak calmed down. This guy was always so mysterious, and the girls trusted him very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please follow me. Everyone else, please leave as well. Murong Yu lightly smiled, then turned around and walked towards Qingxian Peak. The people of Qingxian Peak hurriedly followed, looking around inside the formation like curious babies. However, what would they think if they knew that this was the same formation that had killed Fei Mingzhong of the Yuansu sect? The immortal jutting formation was a killing formation, and it was extremely powerful. Murong Yu's current strength was not enough to unleash the full power of the Immortal Jutting Formation. However, when setting up the Immortal Jutting Formation, Murong Yu used hundreds of magic weapon-grade flying swords and magic weapons, as well as dozens of spirit weapon-grade flying swords. With so many flying swords around Qingxian Peak, the entire Qingxian Peak was enveloped in the Immortal Jutting Formation. If the Immortal Jutting Formation was fully activated, even a Tribulation Passing Stage cultivator would not be able to break through this formation. Moreover, during this process, Murong Yu, with the help of Hichu, set up a few spirit-absorbing formations within Qingxian Peak. The spirit-absorbing formations were formations that absorbed the essence of heaven and earth. With the existence of these formations, the Immortal Jutting Formation could operate on its own and would never collapse due to a lack of spirit chi. Moreover, with these spirit-absorbing formations, the essence of heaven and earth in Qingxian Peak would become denser and denser. Chapter 108. Setting up the array took Murong Yu half a month. In the main hall of Qingxian Peak, more than 10 people gathered together. Here, Murong Yu told them the method of entering and exiting the Immortal Jutting Array. He instructed them to teach the method to the newly recruited 100 disciples so that they could enter and exit the Immortal Jutting Array. However, there was a problem at this time. Huawei asked, "The Immortal Jutting Array sounds very powerful. However, once the number of disciples in Qingxian Peak increases, the method of entering and exiting the array will be leaked. When that happens, won't the array be useless?" Hearing this, the others nodded. They all had the same thought. Murong Yu smiled and said, "After all, this is the Hidden Fairy Valley. The Immortal Jutting Array will not be activated normally. Even if you accidentally enter the array, you will only be trapped inside. Because of this, even if you know the method of entering and exiting the array, it will be useless, because once the array is activated, the method of entering and exiting will immediately lose its effectiveness. When that happens, no one will be able to enter and exit the array freely. Of course, I have already taught Jiqing the method of activating the array. When you are strong enough, you can gradually master the Immortal Jutting Array. Is this array really useful?" A female disciple asked. When they were passing through the array, they really did not feel anything special about it. Other than some clouds and faint killing intent on his body, everything else was the same as usual. Moreover, the most peculiar thing about this array was that it was impossible to see inside Qingxian Peak from the outside. Even spiritual could not penetrate it. However, inside the array, it was easy to see what was happening outside. Outside Ancient Spring City, I used this array to kill Yuan Su Sek's form synthesis stage elder. Do you think this array is useful?" Murong Yu said with a smile. Shocked. Everyone was shocked as they looked at each other with a horrified expression on their faces. At this time, they finally realized that they had just walked through the gates of hell. If Murong Yu had activated the array at that time, they would have been blown to smithereens. In the following period of time, Murong Yu very generously took out 100 mid-grade magic tool-grade flying swords and 1 million yuan recovery pills and gave them to Huawei and the others. This was the treatment that new disciples received. There were no more high-grade flying swords, but each of them received a mid-grade flying sword and 10,000 yuan recovery pills. This made these people overjoyed at the turn of events. At the same time, Murong Yu said, "Use the energy recovery pill as much as you want. Don't be afraid of wasting it. As long as it's within your tolerance, you can directly increase your cultivation level. No matter how many origin-returning pills you want, I can provide them all. Furthermore, as long as your strength reaches the level of a core disciple of the Hidden Fairy Valley, you may even have a spiritual artifact flying sword or magical artifact." After hearing Murong Yu's words, the people on Qingxian Peak almost went crazy. You wouldn't have to worry about the essence recovery pill. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. As long as one reaches the silent spirit stage, there's a possibility of obtaining a spiritual weapon. This treatment made them go crazy. Of course, Moroni did not spare any expense in grooming them, but it was not without conditions. He needed loyalty. They needed to be loyal to him and Zhao Jiqing. In fact, these days, Moroni's performance was a bit overwhelming. He had vaguely become the master of Qing Xian Peak. Of course, Zhao Jiqing did not mind. Qing Xian Peak was about 10 miles in radius. In the following period of time, the people on Qing Xian Peak cultivated crazily and also began to build Qing Xian Peak. Finally, under their efforts, Qing Xian Peak became more and more lively. Furthermore, within a month, there were disciples who broke through their cultivation level. The most delightful thing was that Zhao Jiqing's cultivation had already entered the fusion stage. Furthermore, she did not use the accumulation of pills. Instead, she relied on her own cultivation. Her cultivation speed was really shocking and made people speechless. It even far surpassed Moroni's speed. Of course, Moroni only let out a sigh. The more powerful Zhao Jiqing was, the happier Moroni was. Moreover, although Moroni was now only in the middle stage of the revolving reflection stage, he could almost sweep away all the heart-stirring stage cultivators. Therefore, sometimes cultivation level did not mean anything to Moroni. On this day, Moroni leisurely returned to the main peak from Qing Xian Peak. Along the way, he met many Qing Xian Peak disciples. These female disciples very affectionately called him Big Brother Moroni. These people all knew the relationship between Moroni and Zhao Jiqing. Moreover, everything they were using now was provided by this seemingly harmless but infamous person. Moroni was very happy with how everyone addressed him. Therefore, he smiled and nodded in response. Jiqing. Moroni stepped into the main peak's main hall and called out, only to find that there was a stranger in the main hall. In fact, it was not a stranger. Moroni had seen this person before at the Immortal Cultivation Assembly. Moroni greets Elder Huangfu. Since you have something to discuss, I won't disturb you. Moroni said, as he was about to leave the main hall. Moroni, this time I came because of you. Huangfu Ranshue looked at Moroni and said with a smile. She seemed to have a good impression of this Moroni. Elder Huangfu came to find me? What's the matter? Moroni asked with a shocked expression, but he did not leave. Huangfu Ranshue gestured for Moroni to sit down, then looked at Moroni and asked with a smile, Moroni, you have been in the Hidden Fairy Valley for 3 months, right? How do you feel about the Hidden Fairy Valley? Moroni looked at Huangfu Ranshue, but he was a little suspicious in his heart. He did not know what she meant, but he still replied, it's okay. Well, it is indeed worthy of being one of the top 10 sections. It occupies a vast area and has a strong army. I think the Hidden Fairy Valley definitely has the ability to become the leader of the top 10 sections. Hearing Moroni's answer, Elder Huangfu was stunned for a moment. Then a smile appeared on her face, and she continued, in the past 3 months, Qing Xian Peak has been gradually improving with your help. All the disciples' cultivation has increased. You have spared no effort in helping us. It really makes me feel ashamed. Moroni smiled a little shyly. It's okay. I am helping Jiqing. Although she is Elder Huangfu to take care of her, I am still worried about her, so I can only do my best to make her stronger, that is all. You're more or less unjustified like this. Moroni, I have a suggestion, but I don't know if I should say it. Huangfu Ranshue looked at Moroni and smiled. Moroni smiled slightly. Elder Huangfu, you don't want me to join the Hidden Fairy Valley, do you? If that is the case, I will have to think about it carefully. Huangfu Ranshue was stunned. Her purpose today was to ask Moroni to join the Hidden Fairy Valley. After all, no matter in which aspect, Moroni was definitely a talent. Don't worry, our Hidden Fairy Valley will not be like Zushinzong. If you can join the Hidden Fairy Valley, we will definitely not interfere with any of your secrets. Moroni pondered for a moment. In fact, he had already thought about joining the Hidden Fairy Valley many times. However, he was worried that the Hidden Fairy Valley would be like Zushinzong, coveting his things. After all, once bitten, twice shy. Moroni did not want to be plotted against again and again. Moreover, Although joining a sect would give him a strong backing, there were still many restrictions. However, there were also many restrictions. Thus, it was better to be a loose cultivator and live a carefree life. I am sorry, Elder Huangfu. I will need some time to think about this. Murong did not immediately refuse. Huangfu ran. Shui did not force him. In the following time, everyone chatted for a while before leaving. Elder Huangfu. Just as Huangfu ran, Shui was about to leave Qingxian Peak. Murong followed her. Have you thought about it? Murong shook his head and said, I want to know, is it possible for Jiqing to become the sect leader of the Hidden Fairy Valley? It is possible, but without a certain level of strength, it is impossible to become the sect leader. Murong nodded. As long as it was possible, it was fine. As for strength, with Zhao Jiqing's immortal spirit body, he believed that her strength would increase very quickly. As for Qingxian Peak, with his strong support, what was there to be afraid of? After Huangfu ran, Shui left. Murong stood alone on the peak of the mountain and fell into deep thought. After thinking for a long time, Murong finally made a decision. It is time to leave. The world of cultivation was vast. Murong path was ahead of him, and not just stuck on Qingxian Peak. In the next few days, Murong transferred some magic treasures and pills to Zhao Jiqing. Then, he left Qingxian Peak alone and left the Hidden Fairy Valley. The reason why he decided to leave Qingxian Peak now was because Qingxian Peak was on the right track. With the support of Murong's pills and magic treasures, Zhao Jiqing could naturally control the future development of Qingxian Peak. Therefore, he was not too worried about leaving just like that. After all, Zhao Jiqing had her own path to walk. Murong did not want to interfere too much with her. During this process, he did not look for Huangfu Ran Shui. He said that he would think about it, but he did not say when he would give Huangfu Ran Shui an answer. Outside the Hidden Fairy Valley, Han Tao, who had already received the news, led a group of disciples to hide in a valley, waiting for Murong's arrival. After leaving the Hidden Fairy Valley, Murong rode on his long spear and flew into the distance. Boom! Just as Murong was about 10 miles away from the Hidden Fairy Valley, Murong was flying at high speed. Then, a huge hand suddenly reached out from the 9 heavens. It shattered the void and shattered the heavens. It directly grabbed Murong's head and face. Murong narrowed his eyes slightly. A cold, murderous intent flashed across his eyes. He had a cold smile on his face, and his eyes were indifferent. However, he did not look surprised. Obviously, he knew that he would encounter something like this. You are courting death. Murong snorted coldly. 60 extremely condensed shadows of Pan Chi circled above his head. Then he punched out. Chapter 109. Boom. The power of 60 heavenly chains was earth-shattering and could even shatter the sky. However, the moment the energy hit the giant hand, the gigantic hand that was descending fiercely slapped down. In an instant, Murong's power was shattered to pieces. However, the large hand didn't seem to be hindered in the slightest as it continued to reach for Murong with incomparable speed. Murong furrowed his brows. At this critical juncture, he immediately rushed to the ground from the sky. Then, he stepped on the troop formula and turned into a stream of light, flying into the distance at high speed. Boom! After an earth-shattering sound, the giant hand slammed down and a terrifying power exploded. A mountain peak was directly shattered. Everything within a radius of a few miles was smashed into pieces. However, Murong's speed was very terrifying. At the last moment, he rushed out, and the power of the giant hand did not affect him. However, at this moment, Murong had stopped in his tracks, because in front of him, there were already more than 10 cultivators wearing the Hidden Fairy Valley's disciple robes. The leader was Han Tao, a true disciple of the Hidden Fairy Valley and a cultivator in the spirit severing stage. However, at this moment, his face was very ugly. It was he who attacked just now. He was a severed soul expert, yet he couldn't even touch the sleeves of Murong, a revolving reflection cultivator. This made him feel extremely embarrassed and humiliated. Murong stopped and looked angrily at Han Tao and the others. Although he had already guessed that Han Tao would attack him, he was still very angry when he saw the other party. Han Tao, you want to kill me? I didn't expect a true disciple of the Hidden Fairy Valley to be so despicable and shameless. Murong looked at the other party and said angrily, I'm shameless. Han Tao sneered. If you hadn't been in Qing Xian Peak all the time, I would have killed you. Why would I wait until now? However, I also feel lucky. If I had killed you that day, I wouldn't have known that you had so many magic treasures and pills. As he spoke, Han Tao's face was full of greed. The other disciples of the Hidden Fairy Valley also looked at Murong with shining eyes. There was no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. Murong actions in the past few months on Qing Xian Peak had already spread. In the eyes of some people, Murong had long since become a moving treasure trove with a large amount of magic treasures and elixirs. As long as he could capture Murong, he'd become rich overnight and possess an endless supply of magical treasures and elixirs. Hearing this, Murong was a little surprised. Initially, he thought that Han Tao was looking for him because of his relationship with Su Rue a few months ago, but he didn't expect that the other party was actually after his treasures and resources. I have plenty of magic treasures and pills. However, you bunch of trash want to take them from me? You don't have the ability. Murong sneered. Among the 10 great sects, the Hidden Fairy Valley was not only the head of the 10 great sects, but they also had the best reputation. However, no matter where it was, there would always be a black sheep. For example, a disciple like Han Tao, and a direct disciple at that. They seemed to be very experienced, and it seemed like they had done this many times. Is that so? Han Tao sneered and waved his hand. Take him down. Remember, don't kill him. Hearing this, more than 10 disciples of the Hidden Fairy Valley sneered and charged at Murong. Murong squinted his eyes, and a fierce killing intent burst out from his eyes. His killing intent spread throughout the forest. Those who have designs on me must die. You're no exception. Murong sneered and suddenly shouted, Myriad sword arts. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Just as Murong shouted, more than 10 flying swords burst out from his body. Hundreds of millions of sword rays splashed out and attacked indiscriminately in all directions. In an instant, the sword chi was everywhere. Countless sword shadows shattered everything and killed everything. Hundreds of millions of sword rays tore out, and the sky was filled with densely packed sword rays. Hundreds of millions of sword rays filled every inch of space. In the first moment, more than half of the disciples who charged at Murong were crushed into pieces before they could react. The rest of the disciples reacted quickly and brought out their flying swords. They danced in the air to resist the sword chi that filled the sky. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of metal clashing could be heard. At this moment, Murong made his move. He used the army formula and moved at an unparalleled speed. His body was like a phantom, and he turned into a black flowing light and moved quickly. The Black Phoenix spear transformed into a black divine dragon. It was constantly emitting light in Murong hand. The spear pierced out like the roar of a hidden dragon, and it stretched out its 5 claws. A heart-stirring stage cultivator did not even have time to react. He was blasted into a cloud of blood mist by Murong. Then, Murong's body swayed and disappeared from the spot. The long spear in his hand shattered the void and pierced through hundreds of millions of time and space. It directly pierced through a disciple of the Hidden Fairy Valley. He lifted up the disciple of the Hidden Fairy Valley with a single strike. The long spear vibrated. A terrifying power burst out and crushed this disciple. Die! Murong roared and swung the long spear. He smashed a disciple of the Hidden Fairy Valley into pieces. Bang! 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 In a short period of time, Murong exploded with extreme strength. In the blink of an eye, he killed all the disciples of the Hidden Fairy Valley. In just a few breaths of time, Murong killed all of them. His speed was fast, and his attacks were ruthless. He was truly merciless. Haitao stared blankly at the scene in front of him. At this moment, he still had not recovered from the shock of Murong Yu killing all these people so quickly. He did not expect Murong Yu's strength to be so terrifying. Although he did not bring many people this time, most of them were fusion stage cultivators. These people were all disciples under him. He was only an ordinary direct disciple. He was not a saint, nor was he the head disciple. He also did not have any great contributions to the hidden fairy valley. Therefore, he did not have his own mountain. Originally, there were not many people under him. Moreover, he had just become a direct disciple not long ago. In addition, he did not have many resources on hand. These fusion stage cultivators were already considered elite disciples under him. Of course, he still had heart-stirring stage cultivators like Su Rue, but there were only a limited number of them. Today, the majority of his elite disciples have been killed by Murong Yu in just a few breaths of time. This had shocked him and caused him to feel an unbearable heartache. If news of this were to spread and all the people under him were killed, who would dare to rely on him in the future? You're courting death. I'm going to kill you. Hantao finally reacted. He stretched out his hand and smashed it down on Murong Yu, covering the sky and the sun. At this moment, Haitao was extremely furious. This time, he had increased his strength by 100%. However, he did not lose his rationality due to his anger. He knew that as long as he killed Murong Yu and took his resources, there would be a large number of disciples under him. Therefore, although he attacked in anger, he was secretly cautious. A severed spirit expert? I killed quite a few of them that day. Murong Yu sneered. With a flash of his body, he disappeared from where he stood. Boom! The huge hand smashed down and smashed everything in a radius of several kilometers. However, Murong Yu disappeared into thin air. Haitao, Murong Yu, will remember today's matter. In the future, when I succeed in my cultivation, I will settle the score with you. Murong Yu's voice came from afar. Following that, Brian saw Murong Yu's figure move like a bolt of lightning, leaping across the ground and disappearing from sight. Murong Yu? He's the one who betrayed Zhushenzong and killed several of Zhushenzong's transcending tribulation stage elders. Haitao was stunned. He stood in place with a blank expression. He actually forgot to chase after Murong Yu. In fact, it was not that he forgot. Instead, after learning about Murong Yu's identity, he hesitated and was frightened. Murong Yu was a ruthless person who could even kill a transcending tribulation stage expert. I heard that Murong Yu has a powerful golden skeleton. Just now, he didn't release the golden skeleton. Thinking of this, Haitao's back was suddenly soaked with cold sweat. However, Haitao had some doubts. He doubted Murong Yu's identity. However, at this time, he really did not dare to chase after Murong Yu. If it was not Murong Yu, then it would be fine. But what if it was Murong Yu? If he just rushed up like this, wouldn't he be courting death? Damn it! Why didn't I know that he was Murong Yu? Haitao roared unwillingly. In the past few months, although Murong Yu's name had spread throughout the hidden fairy valley, he had become a moving treasure trove. However, they only knew about Murong, but did not know about Murong Yu's true identity. This was because in Qingxian Peak, those people only called Murong Yu Big Brother Murong. Who knew about Murong Yu's true identity? Only Zhao Jiqing, Jiang Lu, Chong Lu, and the others. However, they all coincidentally agreed to keep this not-so-secret secret. Otherwise, in the past few months that Murong Yu had been in the hidden fairy valley, Zhushenzong and Yuan Su sect would have already come to find him. How could they let Murong Yu be so quiet and leisurely? This time, when Murong Yu killed Haitao and the others, he did not use the golden skeleton. This was because he did not want to use other forces to kill his enemies. In the end, why did he use Hichu Luoshu to escape? Obviously, Haitao was an expert in the spirit-severing stage. Even if Murong Yu used all his strength, he was not his opponent. Even if the speed of the army formula was unparalleled in the world, Murong Yu's strength was too weak. He could not exert much power. Therefore, he could only use the Hichu Luoshu world to disappear in place and then reappear in the distance. Without knowing that Murong-yu had Hichu, Luoshu, they would only mistakenly think that Murong-yu had the magical power of crossing Calamity stage, teleportation. Although a few months had passed, Zushinzong and Yuan Su sect were still looking for Murong-yu wantonly. They wanted to dig him out of the cultivation world and take him down. Chapter 110. Unlike before, the elders of the two major sects did not make a move. Although there were hundreds of thousands of disciples in the two sections, but there were not many elders. Moreover, they all knew how terrifying Murong-yu was. If they forced Murong-yu into a corner, Murong-yu would fight to the death. At that time, their elders would suffer heavy casualties. Now, all kinds of disciples from the two major sects were looking for Murong-yu. The low-level disciples were only in the foundation establishment stage, while the core disciples and even the true disciples of the major sects were involved. However, some well-known experts did not make a move. For example, the saint, the saintess, and the chief disciple. Although Murong-yu was infamous, his own strength wasn't anything special. He had only relied on the golden skeleton to get to where he was. In the cultivation world, those who were not shameless would have their own self-esteem and pride. They would never be calculative with those who were weaker than them. Therefore, although the two major sects were aggressively chasing after Murong-yu, they were much safer than before. Upper Azure Town was a large city in the cultivation world. Like ancient Spring City, it was a large city where the cultivation world traded goods. However, compared to ancient Spring City, Upper Azure Town was much larger. After all, ancient Spring City could only be considered an ordinary city. Upper Azure Town, on the other hand, was a super city. It was also one of the few cities in the cultivation world. After leaving the hidden Fairy Valley, Murong-yu appeared here. In the Hichu, Luoshu world, there were countless elixirs. However, there were too few Dharma treasures. Apart from the flying swords that Murong-yu used to set up the array and distributed to the disciples of Green Xian Peak, there were not many flying swords left in the Hichu Luoshu world. Therefore, he came to Upper Azure Town this time, mainly to purchase flying swords. After all, without the attraction of flying swords and Dharma treasures, it would not be so easy for Green Xian Peak to recruit more disciples. Furthermore, even if there were people who were willing to join Qing Xian Peak, Murong-yu did not want these people to only use the lowest grade flying swords, which would not increase their strength at all. The Bada Chamber of Commerce was a famous chamber of commerce in the cultivation world. It was similar to the merchant guilds in the secular world, but there were also great differences. The Bada Chamber of Commerce dealt in goods from the cultivation world: elixirs, Dharma treasures, spirit treasures, and other rare treasures. In Upper Azure Town, the Bada Chamber of Commerce owned an extremely luxurious shop. People came and went, and it was very lively. All of them showed the booming business of the Bada Chamber of Commerce. Murong-yu entered the Bada Chamber of Commerce. Looking at the dazzling array of high-quality goods in the shop, he sighed in his heart. In ancient Spring City, Murong-yu had also seen Origin Void Sect shops. However, the Origin Void Sect shop paled in comparison to the shop before his eyes. There was no comparison at all. There were hundreds of flying swords in the display window alone. But Yuan Su Sect's shop only had a pitiful 10 to 20 flying swords. From this, one could see the difference between the two. However, the Bada Chamber of Commerce was a famous chamber of commerce after all. It was normal for them to have such a scale. Murong-yu didn't have much interest in things like spiritual herbs. He stood in front of the display window and looked at the flying swords in a daze. The inferior-grade Dharma weapon flying swords were very cheap, but they still cost 10,000 essence recovery pills. However, the middle-grade Dharma weapon flying swords cost 500,000 essence recovery pills. The most ordinary superior-grade Dharma weapon flying swords cost 1,000,000 essence recovery pills each. Among them, the supreme-grade ones were even more expensive and cost a few million essence recovery pills. Cold sweat broke out on Murong-yu's forehead when he saw the prices of these flying swords. Was the Bada Chamber of Commerce really selling flying swords? This was daylight robbery. According to this price, if Qingxian Peak were to recruit 10,000 disciples in the future, each of them would be given a high-grade flying sword. Using the most common flying sword as an example, 10,000 times a million. Murong Yu's mind was in a mess. 10 billion essence recovery pills. This was the most ordinary configuration. Once everyone in Greenxian Peak became stronger, there would be no point in continuing to configure superior-grade Dharma weapons. That would require higher-grade flying swords, spirit weapons. Murong Yu looked at the price of the spirit weapon flying swords and was speechless. A first-grade spirit weapon cost 50 million essence recovery pills. It was no wonder that there were not many spirit weapons in the cultivation world. Apart from the fact that spirit weapons were extremely difficult to refine, it was also because of the high price. How many people could afford 50 million essence recovery pills? Only those large sects and family clans would be able to allocate flying swords of the spirit weapon level to the talents they were grooming. As for those smaller sects, even if they used all their resources, they would not be able to afford a flying sword spirit weapon. 10,000 people, each of them allocated a first-grade spirit weapon flying sword. Murong Yu frowned and calculated in his heart for a long time before he finally got the answer. 500 billion essence recovery pills. Moreover, if Murong Yu wanted to equip Green Xian Peak, it would not be just flying swords. They would also need all kinds of offensive and defensive Dharma treasures. Moreover, everyone would consume large amounts of essence recovery pills every day. The most important thing was that Green Xian Peak could not only recruit 10,000 disciples. Of course, these were not all allocated at once. However, Murong Yu was just sitting around and eating. There were only so many essence recovery pills in the Hichu, Luoshu world. One less was one less. Murong Yu did some calculations. Adding everything up, he would need at least several trillion origin recovery pills. A few trillion, not just tens of thousands. In the past, Murong Yu still thought that he was considered a wealthy person in the cultivation world. However, he now realized that the resources he had were not worth mentioning. To a certain extent, he was still a poor person. On the contrary, large businesses like the Bada Chamber of Commerce were the real wealthy people. If I can rob the Bada Chamber of Commerce, Murong Yu suddenly had this thought. However, it was just a thought. The Bada Chamber of Commerce was able to stand tall in the cultivation world for so many years without collapsing. The power within the sect must be terrifying. It was probably not inferior to the top 10 sections. Moreover, in terms of financial resources, the top 10 sects could not compare to a super chamber of commerce like the Bada Chamber of Commerce. Looking at the flying swords in the display window, Murong Yu's eyes lit up, but his face was pained. "Sir, is there anything I can help you with?" At this time, a shop assistant who had been staring at Murong Yu for a long time came up and said respectfully to Murong Yu. Murong Yu's heart was pained, but in the end he still bought these things. Thus, he pointed to the flying swords and said to the shop assistant, "How many middle-grade and upper-grade flying swords do you have for sale here?" Hearing Murong Yu's words, the shop assistant's heart jumped. He suddenly felt that a big business had come knocking. Thus, he became more enthusiastic and said, "Sir, if you want to buy flying swords, how many do you need? We have enough reserves here. As long as you have enough pills, we have enough flying swords." Murong Yu's heart jumped. According to this shop assistant, the Bada Chamber of Commerce had a lot of stock here. Was he not afraid of being robbed? Murong Yu secretly cursed in his heart. "I want 100 upper-grade flying swords, 500 middle-grade flying swords, and 50 spirit flying swords." Murong Yu thought for a moment and felt that this number should be enough to buy at this stage. Hearing this, the shop assistant was shocked. He looked at Murong Yu respectfully and said, "Sir, your needs are too big. I can't make the decision. Please follow me to the backstage. I will ask the supervisor to discuss with you personally." The waiter wasn't worried that Murong Yu was spouting nonsense. Who cared? Whoever dared to cause trouble here would be courting death. Murong Yu nodded and did not doubt anything else. He followed the shop assistant to the backstage. Perhaps the shop assistant had already informed the supervisor. When Murong Yu just entered the backstage, a shrewd-looking old man smiled and greeted him. Finally, he led Murong Yu into a room. "Sir, I am the supervisor of the Bada Chamber of Commerce, Wudong. How should I address you?" Wudong's eyes flashed with shrewdness as he looked at Murong Yu with a smile. If what the shop assistant said was true, then today's big business could raise his status in the Bada Chamber of Commerce to a higher level. Murong Yu. Murong Yu was not pretentious and did not hide his identity. Even if he tried to hide it, it would be useless. As long as the Bada Chamber of Commerce was willing, it would be quickly investigated. Murong Yu. Wudong's eyes flickered as he took another glance at Murong Yu. However, he was after all the supervisor of the Bada Chamber of Commerce. The surprise on his face disappeared in a flash. 100 upper-grade flying swords, 500 middle-grade flying swords, and 50 spirit-grade flying swords. I want the stock, Supervisor Wu. There shouldn't be a problem, right? Murong Yu did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. Of course there's no problem. Supervisor Wu took out an abacus and tapped it for a while, then said 100 upper-grade flying swords, 1 million for each, a total of 100 million yuan recovery pills. 500 middle-grade flying swords, 500,000 yuan recovery pills for each, a total of 250 million yuan recovery pills. 50 spirit-grade flying swords, a total of 5 billion yuan recovery pills. 3 types, a total of 85 billion yuan recovery pills. Of course, this is only calculated based on the most common magic weapon. If you want something of better quality, the price will be calculated separately. 85 billion yuan recovery pills. Murong Yu sucked in a breath of cold air. At this moment, he really wanted to ask, "Did you calculate wrongly?" However, in fact, Murong Yu knew that Wudong did not calculate wrongly. 8 billion yuan recovery pills. This was a huge amount of wealth. Even an ordinary first-class person would not be able to take out so many pills at once. Of course, for Murong Yu, he could still take it out. However, 5 billion yuan recovery pills was not a small amount. What made Murong Yu speechless was that he suddenly remembered the immortal Juetian array that was set up outside the ancient spring city that day. At that time, 99 spirit-grade flying swords were used to set up the array. In the end, these spirit-grade flying swords were all shattered by the golden skeleton. The most common spirit-grade flying sword was worth 50 million yuan recovery pills. The lowest grade flying sword used to set up the array that day was a third-grade spirit weapon. The price was getting higher and higher. Now that he thought about it, he had shattered at least 100 billion yuan recovery pills that day. Chapter 111. Thinking of this, Murong Yu's face suddenly showed a pained expression. Compared to the hundreds of billions, the current 8 billion yuan recovery pills was just the tip of the iceberg. However, when Wudong saw Murong Yu's pained expression, he mistakenly thought that Murong Yu was pained by these pills. In fact, he wouldn't feel pained. After all, it was 8 billion and not 28. Wudong's face was full of smiles as he looked at Murong Yu and said, "The total value is 85 billion. This is a big deal. How about this? I'll give you a discount, 10% discount." While speaking, Wudong's fingers tapped on the keyboard and finally said, "After the 10% discount, the total price is 565 billion yuan recovery pills. Mr. Murong Yu, do you want to settle the bill now?" Murong Yu's brows slightly wrinkled and said, "Director Wu, this is a big deal, right? Is it only 10% discount? Can you continue to give me a discount? How about 20% discount?" Director Wu's face showed a smile as he awkwardly said, "Mr. 10% discount is already the best discount. Although the price of our flying swords is not low, but the various materials are also extremely precious. 10% discount is already a small profit." Small profit? Murong Yu sneered in his heart. Although he didn't know how to refine weapons, but the trashiest spirit weapon could be sold for tens of millions of yuan recovery pills. It was absolutely a huge profit. He made a lot of money. Can't you give me a better discount? This isn't the last time I'm going to make a purchase. I will buy a lot in the future. I really can't. Wudong's face was full of embarrassment. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, I'll make the decision. We don't want the change. Mister, only need to pay 5 billion yuan recovery pills. Looking at Wudong's determined face, it seemed that it was extremely difficult for him to make this decision. Morong Yu was speechless in his heart, but he also knew that this was already the lowest price. However, the discount of more than 300 million yuan recovery pills was a small comfort. Mr. Morong, our goods are ready. I wonder. Wudong looked at Morong Yu. His meaning was obvious. He had already prepared the goods. Have you prepared the price? Morong Yu nodded, then frowned slightly and said, 5 billion origin recovery pills is not a small number. Manager Wu, I wonder if you have any storage equipment that is easier and bigger? I'm afraid this place won't be able to store so many pills. No problem. Please wait a moment. Wudong smiled and left the room. Not long after, he walked in again. Then, he handed Morong Yu 2 rings and a few storage pouches. This is a storage ring. Although the space inside is not big, it should be able to store 1 billion recovery pills. Morong Yu nodded and took the ring. He probed it with his divine sense and found that the space inside was much larger than an ordinary storage bag. A normal storage bag didn't have a lot of space. Among the storage bags that Morong Yu had plundered from others before, there were both good and bad quality ones. However, the largest storage bag could only store 10 million yuan recovery pills. There was a world of difference between these storage rings and heaven and earth. Even the storage bag that Wudong brought had a relatively large space. It could store about 100 million yuan recovery pills. Morong Yu threw these storage rings and storage bags into the storage bag at his waist. In fact, he threw them into the Hichu Luoshu world. After filling it with 5 billion yuan recovery pills, he handed it to Wudong. Wudong took the rings with some hesitation and found that there was not a single yuan recovery pill in them. Immediately, he looked at the storage bag at Morong Yu's waist with a very surprised expression. He had never heard of a storage bag with such a large capacity. Moreover, it seemed that Morong Yu had more pills and the like on him. In other words, the capacity of his storage bag was more powerful than he had imagined. However, Wudong didn't know that the storage bag at Morong Yu's waist was actually the lowest grade storage bag. It couldn't hold much. Morong Yu was just using it to deceive others. After confirming that the number of yuan recovery pills was correct, Wudong handed a storage ring to Morong Yu. Morong Yu took it and probed it with his divine thought. He saw 50 spiritual weapons, 100 high-grade magic weapons, and 500 middle-grade magic weapons lying quietly inside. Not a single one was missing. Moreover, it seemed that the quality of these magic weapons should be good. Very good. The number is correct. Morong Yu put the storage ring in the storage bag. In fact, he threw it into the Hichu Luoshu world. The transaction was completed. After completing this transaction, Wudong was obviously very happy. He continued, Mr. Morong, our Bada Chamber of Commerce is one of the top chambers of commerce in the cultivation world. We deal in a variety of products. In addition to flying swords, do you want to take a look? In Wudong's opinion, Morong Yu was definitely a super big customer. If he was interested in other things, it would be another big deal. However, he was obviously going to be disappointed. Morong Yu only wanted to buy flying swords now. He was not interested in anything else. Director Wu, now that you mention it, I am really interested in something. Morong Yu narrowed his eyes and said. Wudong smiled slightly. Why don't we go out and take a look? This guy already regarded Morong Yu as a VIP. No need, it's just that storage ring. Do you want to sell it? How much is one? Morong Yu asked with a smile. Wudong was stunned for a moment before he smiled and said, storage rings are naturally sparkling and translucent. However, your storage pouch is of a much higher grade than our storage rings. Do you still need these small storage rings? Sometimes I need more storage rings, you know, Morong Yu said with a smile. Wudong quickly nodded as if he understood. We sell storage rings. However, Mr. Morong, since you're a big customer of our Bada Commerce, What harm is there in giving you a few? As he spoke, Wu Dong flipped his hand and 3 storage rings appeared. I'm sorry about this, Morong Yu said with some embarrassment. In fact, his movements were extremely fast. He had already taken the 3 storage rings with a single swipe of his hand. He used his divine telekinesis and found that these storage rings had the same capacity as the ones just now. They should be worth a lot. Wu Dong didn't mind. After all, he was planning to give these storage rings to Morong Yu anyway. Even if these storage rings were worth a lot, they had already made a lot of money from the deal with Morong Yu. Right at that moment, someone knocked on the door. Soon after, someone spoke from outside. Supervisor Wu, the elder has something to give to Mr. Morong Yu. Huh? Elder has something to give to Morong Yu? Director Wu was shocked. The elder that the staff mentioned was actually the great elder of the Bada Enterprise, Great Elder Qi Yang. Qi Yang was the great elder of the Bada Enterprise. He had great power in the Bada Enterprise and was second only to one person. The reason why Elder Qi Yang had come to Upper Azure Town this time was only because he had some business to attend to and was passing by. Wu Dong was curious about what Great Elder Qi Yang would give to Morong Yu, so he motioned for the staff to come in. The staff opened the door and walked in. He was holding a tray with both hands. There was a red silk cloth on the tray and a purple token lying quietly on it. The Bada token. When he saw the token, Wu Dong could not help but exclaim. The staff handed the Bada token to Morong Yu directly. Morong Yu grabbed the token and found it heavy. It was purple gold in color and emitted a faint purple light. On one side of the token, the word Bada was engraved in flamboyant calligraphy. On the other side, there was a big Ling word. Looking at Wu Dong's shocked expression, Morong Yu felt a little strange. He picked up the token in his hand and looked at it again. He did not find anything strange about it. It was just a little heavy and looked good. There was nothing special about it. What's so special about this Bada token? Morong Yu asked. Wu Dong took a deep breath and gave Morong Yu a deep look. Then, with a solemn expression, he said, "The 8-talent medallion is the supreme token of our 8-talent Chamber of Commerce. As long as you have this token, you'll get a 20% discount on all purchases in our Bada Enterprise. If you sell something, you'll get the highest price. Among them, with this token, our Bada Enterprise can unconditionally do 3 things for you. Most importantly, there are no more than 10 people in the cultivation world who have the Bada token. Those who have the Bada token are definitely the most important guests of our Bada Enterprise." Morong Yu was shocked. The 20% discount was not enough to shock him. Less than 10 people holding it was not enough to shock him. It was the 3 unconditional things that were truly priceless. The Bada Enterprise was a giant in the cultivation world. Not only were they rich, but they were also very powerful. Even destroying a large sect wouldn't be a problem. In other words, as long as Morong Yu asked them to destroy a big sect, the Bada Enterprise would not hesitate to destroy the sect. It was definitely a priceless treasure. Looking at the Bada token in his hand, Morong Yu was shocked. Wu Dong was also shocked. After a long time, Morong Yu solemnly kept the Bada token in the Hichu Luoshu world. This was a priceless treasure. If he used it well, it would definitely be beneficial to him. However, what puzzled Morong Yu was why the Bada token's great elder would give him such a precious token. Morong Yu definitely did not think that it was just because of his business today. A business of more than 2 billion was definitely a huge business for many people. However, it was definitely not worth mentioning to the Bada Enterprise. Therefore, Chiang definitely did not give him the Bada token because of this. However, other than this, what other reason could there be for Qi Yang to give him the Bada token? Could it be because of the potential he had shown? Potential could be said to be the most illusory thing. Having great potential was a good thing. However, if one fell or died prematurely, then the loss would outweigh the gain. Morong Yu was completely baffled by this. Even Wu Dong couldn't understand it. Chapter 112. Supervisor Wu, I would like to pay a visit to your great elder. Morong Yu pondered for a moment and felt that it would be better for him to pay a visit to the great elder. Otherwise, Morongyu would feel uncomfortable if he did not get to the bottom of this matter. At the very least, he had to find out the reason behind this. Sir, the Great Elder has already left Upper Azure Town. Before he left, he told me that if Mr. Morongyu would like to meet him, the Great Elder will be back at the auction half a month later. The clerk said. Morongyu nodded, then turned to Wu Dong and asked, Manager Wu, what's going on? Is Upper Qingsheng holding an auction? Is it hosted by your Ada trade union? Wu Dong shook his head and smiled bitterly. He was puzzled. Morongyu did not know anything about this. However, Morongyu had only been in the business for 3 years. It was natural that he did not know about this. Of course, Wu Dong had his doubts. Since Morongyu had betrayed Zushenzong, why did he buy so many magic treasures? Could it be that he wanted to cultivate his own force? However, as a qualified businessman, he would not voice out his doubts even though he had countless doubts. Respecting the privacy of a customer was a quality that a qualified businessman must have. Although our Ada trade union is one of the largest trade unions in the cultivation world, we are only selling our products. We are only good at selling all kinds of products. As for the auction house, it is the world's largest auction house in the cultivation world. Its strength is on par with the Ada trade union. Morongyu nodded slightly. As the saying went, there were specializations in every field. The world was so big that it was impossible for one person to do everything. When will the auction start? This is an auction that is held once every 3 years. Although it is not as good as the auction that is held once every 10 years, there are still many rare items. It will take a long time to prepare. It will be held in half a month. Your Great Elder said that he will be back on the day of the auction. Morongyu turned to the clerk and asked. The clerk nodded. If that's the case, then I'll stay in the city for the time being and wait for your Great Elder to come back. I'll take the opportunity to take a look at this auction house. Morongyu immediately decided. He hadn't seen these auction houses before, and this time he planned to go and broaden his horizons. Furthermore, he had nowhere else to go after leaving the hidden fairy valley. In that case, there are a few guest rooms behind our octopus. If you don't mind, you can rest there. That's good. Morongyu smiled and nodded. Since everything was free, Morongyu was arranged to stay in the guest room of the Bada Chamber of Commerce for the time being. In the following days, more and more people entered Upper Azure City, perhaps because of the upcoming auction. All of a sudden, Upper Azure Town became even more lively. Time flew by like flowing water. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Tomorrow was the day of the auction. During this half a month, Morongyu might have been cultivating or searching for treasures in Upper Azure Town. In the process, he met some acquaintances, disciples of the Yuanshu sect and Zushenzong. However, when these people found out about Morongyu's identity, they became restless. However, no one dared to make a move in Upper Azure Town. Moreover, when they found out that Morongyu was in charge of the Bada Chamber of Commerce, they didn't even dare to spy on him outside. What was the Bada Chamber of Commerce? They could easily find an excuse to kill them. On the last day, Morongyu saw an acquaintance. To be precise, it was 2 acquaintances. He had seen one of them before, and the other one he had never seen before. However, they were closely related to him. They were the sect masters of the Yuanshu sect and Zushenzong. When these 2 people met Morongyu, they almost wanted to take Morongyu down. However, they didn't dare to make a move. Even though they were half immortals, how could they make a move in Upper Azure Town? Even if they were given a water tank as guts, they wouldn't dare to make a move. However, Morongyu didn't have such a good temper and couldn't hold it in. After meeting these 2 people, he started cursing at them until they were fuming with anger. After falling out with them, Morongyu didn't want to give them any face at all. So what if they were the sect masters of the top 10 sects? If it wasn't for the fact that Morongyu wasn't confident that he could kill them, he would have already made a move. Even if he didn't make a move, he would have done something like a sneak attack. After giving the 2 sect masters a good scolding, Morongyu returned to the Bada Chamber of Commerce in a carefree mood. Mr. Morong, the Great Elder has been waiting for a long time. As soon as Morongyu returned, Wu Dong came up to him and said. Morongyu's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly followed Wu Dong to the backyard of the Chamber of Commerce. As soon as he stepped into the house, Murong saw an old man with white hair and beard sitting on a chair. On the table next to him, a pot of hot tea was emitting a faint steam, and a tea fragrance assailed his nose. Murong was startled and looked at the old man with white hair and beard. Unlike ordinary cultivators, this person was like an old man who was enjoying life. He didn't have the sharpness of an expert, the aura of an expert, and the smell of money of a businessman. On the contrary, this person gave Murong a very amiable feeling. This was a very natural feeling, and it was definitely not caused by any cultivation technique. No matter how one looked at it, this old man was just like an old grandpa in the mortal world. There was no difference. If there was any difference, an old man of this age in the mortal world would more or less have some twilight aura. However, this person was full of vitality, like a rising sun, full of vitality. Wudong greets the great elder. Wudong immediately bowed to the old man, waking Murong up. So he is the great elder of the Bada Chamber of Commerce, Qiang. Murong secretly said in his heart. Then he cupped his fists and said, Junior Murong greets the great elder Qiang. Qiang looked over and nodded at the two of them with a kind look on his face. He said, have a seat. Murong nodded and didn't argue, directly sitting on the other side of the table. Wudong, on the other hand, took his leave. I heard that little friend Murong is very interested in me. Qiang poured a cup of tea for Murong and said with a smile. Murong suddenly felt a little scared. Although this person looked like a benevolent old man, he didn't seem to care. Murong didn't forget his identity and status. Murong was shocked that such an existence would personally pour tea for him, but at the same time, he admired this old man. After all, with his cultivation and status, being able to meet a small cultivator like Murong was already giving him a lot of face, but now he was pouring tea for Murong. This wasn't as simple as just giving face. Murong picked up the tea and took a sip. Immediately, a fragrant aroma filled his mouth. Good tea. Murong couldn't help but praise. This was all he could taste. As for the real tea, he didn't even taste good tea when he was at Murong's home. Moreover, his status was low, so how could he have the opportunity to taste tea? Murong put down the teacup and looked at Qiang with a smile. You seem to be more interested in me. I should be the one asking you that. You mean the bottom medallion? Qiang asked. Murong nodded. If I said I saw your potential, would you believe me? Qiang said with a smile. Murong was startled. Of course, he didn't believe him. This might be enough to fool others, but it wasn't enough to fool him. He shook his head and smiled. I don't think that's all. What I'm more curious about is, other than my potential, what else does the old man see in me? Or rather, what do I have that the old man is interested in? Qiang took a sip of tea and said after a long pause, Heaven's secrets can't be revealed. Murong rolled his eyes. What was the difference between that and not saying anything? From the looks of it, are you unhappy because you don't know why I gave you the bottom medallion? You don't even want to owe me a favor? Murong nodded. That was how it was. He even considered returning the octopus token if he didn't know why Qiang wanted to give him the octopus token. After all, he didn't feel at ease using something he didn't know anything about. A favor. Murong, you have great potential and will achieve great things in the future. The reason I gave you the bottom medallion is so that you will owe the Bada Chamber of Commerce a favor. A favor? Murong laughed. The Bada Chamber of Commerce is one of the giants of the cultivation world. Why would they need a favor from me? What can I do? First, it's not for now, but it will be. Of course, maybe I won't need your favor. Even if there's a day when I need it, I won't force you. I only want you to do something within your power. It's that simple. Murong was suspicious. It's that simple. Qiang smiled faintly and added more tea for Murong. Little friend, you didn't come here just because of this question, right? Why don't you drop everything and drink tea with me? Then it would be impolite of me to refuse. After confirming Qiang's intentions, he still had some doubts in his heart. However, he had already relaxed. The World Auction was the largest auction house in the entire cultivation world, second to none. It was spread throughout the entire cultivation world. The Tianxia Auction House in Upper Azure City was just one of his branches. Moreover, the auction this time wasn't considered very large. It was just an auction that was held once every 3 years. Even so, the auction house was still crowded with people from all over the cultivation world. People from various sects and families came to bid for the items. After all, items that could enter the world auction were definitely of high quality. Moreover, some very precious items would appear every time there was a ranking. This year, it was said that a mysterious item appeared. In Upper Azure Town, which Chamber of Commerce had the most luxurious shop? It was definitely the shop of the giants like the Bada Chamber of Commerce. However, compared to the World Auction House, their shops paled in comparison and appeared somewhat shabby. Chapter 113. The World Auction House was the most luxurious and largest building in Upper Qingqing. In front of the auction house, there was a sea of people who were going to enter the auction. Murong Yu entered the auction house with Elder Qi Yang, Wu Dong, and a few other staff members. After all, the Bada Chamber of Commerce was one of the largest chambers of commerce in the world. Therefore, the auction house had arranged for them to have their own private room. Like other powerful sects, families, and individuals, they were all qualified to have a private room. They were not squeezed together with the people in the auction house's main hall. This is the treatment. After entering the private room, Murong Yu realized that the decorations were even more luxurious. Moreover, it seemed that every private room had been sealed. From the outside, one could not see what was going on inside. Even divine thought could not enter. However, from the inside of the private room, one could see everything clearly. Furthermore, each private room had a few young, beautiful, and graceful girls serving as maids, pouring tea and water for each guest. This treatment made Murong Yu sigh. However, he soon stopped sighing. This was because Qi Yang, Wu Dong, and a few staff members of the Bada Chamber of Commerce were all shocked. They did not show any signs of surprise. Obviously, they had seen it before. In comparison, Murong Yu suddenly felt that he was a country bumpkin who had just entered the city for the first time. He was too ignorant. Murong Yu smiled awkwardly and sat down. At this moment, Qiang waved his hand and dismissed the two maids. There will probably be many treasures in this auction. Murong Yu, if there is anything that you like, feel free to bid. As long as the price is within the range of the Bada Chamber of Commerce, we will help you get it. Qiang took a sip of tea and turned to look at Murong Yu. Murong Yu was shocked and looked at Qi Yang in surprise. He was not shocked by Qi Yang's generosity. In truth, even if Murong Yu had taken a fancy to something, he could simply buy it. To a giant like the Bada Chamber of Commerce, it was nothing. After all, Qi Yang had already given away the Bada token. If you were to give her some more now, it would just be icing on the cake. What shocked Murong Yu was Qi Yang's words. As long as the price is within the range of our Bada enterprise. The Bada Chamber of Commerce was a giant in the cultivation world and possessed unparalleled wealth. Since even Qi Yang had said so, did that mean that there might be something extremely valuable in this auction? If that was the case, then it would be interesting. Murong Yu secretly looked forward to it. He could already see the scene of everyone fighting. Hello everyone, we meet again. Half a day later, the tens of thousands of guests were already in their seats. At this moment, a vigorous old man walked up to a huge stage behind the auction house. The auction was about to begin. Murong Yu looked at the old man expectantly. I believe that many of you already know this old man. However, there seem to be a lot of new friends. Before the auction begins, allow this old man to introduce himself to my new friend. I'm Yin Xingji, the manager of this auction house. This time, I will personally host the auction. To think that Yin Xingji will personally host the auction. Before the old man's voice even fell, the entire auction house started to discuss. Each and every one of them was greatly astonished. What's wrong with him personally hosting the auction? Murong Yu looked at Wu Dong beside him in confusion. Generally speaking, the auction house has a dedicated auctioneer in charge of the auction. As the manager, Yin Xingji will not be the auctioneer himself. And every time he took on the role of auctioneer, there would always be a very precious item in the auction. Murong Yu nodded. This time, Yin Xingji was the auctioneer, which was to tell everyone to prepare their pills and the like to fight. This time, there would definitely be treasures. Now that the introductions are over, I will now announce the start of the auction. As the appetizer of this auction, this time we have a top-quality high-grade flying sword. While Yin Xingji was speaking, a staff member of the auction house held a flying sword and walked up to the stage. Murong Yu looked over and found that it was indeed a high-grade flying sword. However, this flying sword was different from ordinary high-grade magic weapons. The flying sword had two colors, one red and one blue, which constantly intertwined on the sword body, emitting red and blue light. The two red and blue lights were like two divine dragons, intertwining within the flying sword. The most strange thing was that this flying sword actually emitted two completely different auras, blazing hot and cold. Two extreme powers actually appeared on the same flying sword at the same time, and they seemed to be compatible with each other without any rejection. Just like this flying sword had already shown an extraordinary side. As everyone can see, this is a flying sword with two attributes of water and fire. Yin Xingji held the flying sword in his hand and injected a little power into it. Boom! The long sword suddenly shone brightly. Two extreme attribute lights of red and blue emerged. The two powers, one hot and one cold, emitted a very powerful aura like a coiling divine dragon. Although this flying sword is only a high-grade magic weapon, because of the two attributes, its power is comparable to a spiritual weapon. Therefore, the price is 5 million recovery pills, and each bid must not be less than 100,000. Now the bidding begins. 1 million. As soon as Yin Xingji's voice fell, a person shouted a price. After all, this was a high-grade magic weapon comparable to a spiritual weapon. In addition to the two attributes, although it was not comparable to a grade 1 spiritual weapon, it was not far off. And a grade 1 spiritual weapon flying sword would cost at least 50 million recovery pills. And this was only the starting price of 5 million, which was only 1/10 of the price. 2 million. Immediately, a second person shouted a price. 5 million, 6 million, 7 million. In just a few breaths, the price of this flying sword had increased by 7 million recovery pills. This made Murong Yu feel surprised, but he also felt that these people were crazy. 10 million recovery pills. I'll take it. At that moment, a pleasant voice, like that of an oriole, came from a private room not far from Murong Yu. You want to get this flying sword with 10 million? Ridiculous. 11 million. Another person raised the price, and from the voice, it was also a woman. Are these people crazy? Murong Yu was speechless. It was just a high-grade magic weapon flying sword, but the competition was so fierce. It was not like the Bada Chamber of Commerce did not have any spiritual weapon flying swords, so they could just buy it. It was not worth it to spend such a large sum of money here. This flying sword's power is comparable to a grade 1 spiritual weapon. And a grade 1 spiritual weapon requires at least 50 million recovery pills. Such a cheap flying sword is not sold outside. And the most important thing is that this flying sword has two attributes. Moreover, this flying sword is magnificent and gorgeous, suitable for those female cultivators who love beauty. Murong Yu nodded. Now the bidders were basically female cultivators. And the price had risen to 20 million recovery pills. 30 million. A trembling voice came from a private room not far away. Listening to the trembling voice, Murong Yu felt a little funny. 30 million recovery pills was nothing to this woman. After all, who could enter the private room was not rich and overbearing. This woman's voice was trembling. Most likely she was gnashing her teeth. As Murong Yu guessed, now this woman was gnashing her teeth and could not wait to kill the other people who were bidding with her. But when she called out the price of 30 million, no one increased the price. Obviously, the price of this flying sword had reached its peak. In the end, after Yin Xingji called out 3 times, no one increased the price, and finally this high-grade magic weapon flying sword was sold for 30 million recovery pills. The price was 10 times higher than an ordinary high-grade magic weapon. After this appetizer, the atmosphere of the entire auction house had been ignited. Next, Yin Xingji consecutively auctioned several items. However, they were either some refining materials or some precious medicinal herbs. Because they were not peerless treasures, there were no surprises. However, they were auctioned off by some sects or individuals who specialized in refining weapons and medicine. Seeing that the people below were not interested, Yin Xingji smiled and said, "The next item is a defensive treasure robe. The purple ribbon immortal robe. Purple ribbon immortal robe." Hearing these 4 words, Murong, who happened to be sipping tea, could not help but jump up from his chair and spit out the tea in his mouth. Everyone in the private room was shocked by Murong's strong reaction and hurriedly looked at Murong. Murong had already looked down. On the high platform, a maid was holding a tray, and on the tray was a purple ribbon that emitted a powerful aura. Purple ribbon immortal robe. When Murong saw the purple ribbon, he was shocked. It really is the purple ribbon immortal robe. Looking at the purple ribbon, Murong could not be more shocked. This purple ribbon was identical to Murong's purple ribbon immortal robe. Could there be a second purple ribbon immortal robe in the cultivation world? Murong thought to himself in shock. Seeing Murong's shocked expression, Qi Yang and Wu Dong both looked at him in surprise. Murong's reaction was too big. "Young Murong, could it be that you've taken a fancy to this purple ribbon immortal robe? Why don't you bid for it?" Qi Yang said with a smile. Hearing this, Murong reacted and said embarrassedly, "No, I've only heard of the purple ribbon immortal robe before, but I didn't expect to see it now. That's why I'm shocked." Qi Yang nodded slightly, acknowledging Murong's generosity. However, he said with a smile, "I'm afraid this purple ribbon immortal robe is different from what you've heard." Murong looked at Qi Yang strangely. Qi Yang did not answer his question. Instead, he said, "You'll know when you see it." Seeing that Qi Yang did not say anything, Murong did not ask any more questions and only looked down at the high platform. Like Murong, most of the people in the auction house were looking at the purple ribbon. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.